What's your question? I don't get it.
What are you defining as being rational? You keep saying women are emotional, but then when I give you studies, you don't want those. Are you saying that men come to an intuitive feeling decision?
It's a dumb study that's trying to deny reality.
So how are men coming to more rational
being able
decisions?
to rationalize something doesn't mean you're logical and common sense.
So how do men become more rational than women? What do they do? How do they come to more rational conclusions?
By loving what's right and not listening to women for one, and not listening to their emotions and chasing after women.
So if you don't listen to their emotions, then what are you listening to come to a rational conclusion?
Common sense.
Is that not an emotion?
Common sense, which comes from God.
Well, I'm going to trample the joke, and then I'm also going to respond. I'm just wondering, are you a stay-at-home dad? Because this sounds like eerily autobiographical. Sounds like you're just kind of talking about your life here on a soapbox. Are you a stay-at-home dad? I'm just asking.
No.
No? You sure about that?
I've been home with my kids before, but I also work 5 days a week.
Don't you drive a minivan or something?
Yeah. Yeah, I do drive a minivan. You made fun of me for that.
You drive your luxury.
Well, I like how I live the trad life while you live the mad life. I do think that's cute.
I don't think having kids out of wedlock with a baby mom is the trad life. Maybe that's trad for like black people.
Can I just lay something out really quickly? I have 2 kids and I'm married. And by the way, all my kids, I'm pretty sure.
Were you married when you had the kids?
I'm pretty sure all my kids and my wife are like 100% Aryan, okay? So
we're over here
living the fucking trad life while you're living the mad life.
They're not white on the inside.
I go to bed with my wife in bed next to me. You go to bed with your anime pillow and a fucking dirty sock.
Your wife
shut
is
the
ugly,
fuck up.
so
Start
I would rather
actually
have a dirty
addressing what
sock
I'm
than your
saying.
wife.
You're
We gotta get back on track.
Hey everybody, tonight we're debating whether or not there is a war on men, and we are starting right now with Brittany's opening statement. Thanks so much for being with us, Brittany. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. All right, so I did write something out really quick, so I'll just read that. So I think there is a war on men, but it's also mostly on white men. You have this constant pussification of men, mostly done by liberals, making them into these weak, sappy, apologetic creatures no woman actually wants to be with. And if they are, I guarantee the woman is walking all over them. Women try to act like that's what they want, but I promise you they are lying to you and to themselves. So this hurts women too, as it makes the dating pool a lot smaller. I would say there's a fine line between respect and being a pushover. And that's usually confidence, something they are trying to remove from men. When you lose confidence, you either become weak or you lash out and overcompensate. A big source of men's confidence throughout the years has been from status, whereas a source of women's confidence has been their sexuality. And it's why both use these tools when seeking out a mate. But now women still get to use their sexuality as well as going for the man's role in society on top of it. When I say status, I mean being a provider, a protector, and basically someone women could look to for guidance and help. But as we take those roles away, a man is naturally going to cause a reaction. And anytime people feel threatened, there's usually going to be a backlash, and it's caused a lot of men to either hate women or resent them for it. And the rest to just submit and become women themselves, whether literally or just acting like it. You can also add in the whole Me Too movement and how people have weaponized sexual assault, but I think that's good for now. All right, that's good. Are we all doing the pro side first, or are we going back and forth?
You got it. We'll kick it over to someone else from the yes side. In particular, folks, in case you're confused, everybody on the far right side of the screen, namely Nick, Brittany, and Alex, as well as Hake on the bottom middle, they are actually defending the yes position. And then everybody on the left side, namely Stardust, Radical Coder, Doobie, and then Hunter in the very middle, they're defending the no position. So we'll kick it over to the second person with their 2-minute opening as well on the yes side before we go to the next person on the yes side as well.
I'll go. Okay, so guys, I think it's just plain and simple that there's a feminization of men and a masculinization of women. You look at the whole trans community, you have people like Leah Thomas, who swam on the men's team for 3 years and was able to take puberty blockers and then swim on the men's team and then win and become an NCAA champion. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to confuse people and they're trying to take away gender. And I think that is a direct war on men, because by, obfuscating, it's a hard word to say, you're trying to blend all the genders and say that there's a million genders. But it's very simple. Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina. But sadly, a man that likes to use his penis, they're going to call that toxic masculinity. We live in a society and in a country that was built by strong men, but now they're taking that away. They say there's a huge pay gap. But if you actually look at the stats, women are at the same age as men are paid basically the same. So it's a lot of lies done, and it's done on purpose to attack men like myself, to make us feel guilty for being big daddy, pimp daddies on a blimp eating shrimp. So we live in a society where you cannot be the same man that you once was. The type of people that we idolize and the heroes that we use now in all the cartoons are all trans people. So I think it's just the mixture of what is the male, and they're trying to confuse people. They're trying to confuse children. That's why there's so many kids on puberty blockers. That's why there's so many kids on gender hormone therapy, because they want to take away the man. They want to take away our kids that are boys and transition them to girls. So that alone, just the amount of people that have transitioned in 2022 compared to 1962 is like a million times more. So that is pure evidence of a war on men. And I think men right now need to stand up for what is right. We need more toxic masculinity in today's society.
Thank you very much.
That's it.
We'll kick it over to Nick and then to Hate for the last one. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. Great to be joining all of you, especially Hunter. It's been a tough debate to get with this guy, Big Shot. But
sorry, it's been tough with the trad life. You know how it is, man.
I understand. Yes. Well, so let me just launch into my opening statement. There is clearly and obviously a war against men, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle. I don't think it has actually anything to do with what women want per se, and how this is affecting women. And I agree that the transgender deal is an assault on men, but I also think that the war on men started a longer time ago than just the recent trans debacle, which is really just metastasized recently. The war on men is really all about feminism and the elevation of women to the exclusion of men, which started with women's suffrage, women's rights 100 and some years ago. Revolution and liberation of women and the advancement of women has come at the exclusion of men, and women are replacing men in university, in the workplace. We're being told the future is female, and what is the implication? There's no future for the boys, no future for men. What is that supposed to mean? Men are in the past? I don't think so. So I think that you look at all the institutions in the world, they're having a feminizing influence, whether that's in primary schools, in the workplace with the HR departments. Men are being filled up with pills and beer full of phytoestrogen, being made to watch football. And there's a war on all the masculine regimes and institutions in the world, such as the state of Russia, Taliban, military, police, things like that. Even the black men are under attack. They're putting all the black rappers in dresses. Black rappers used to be last vestige of masculinity because they beat women and called them bitches and shot people. And now Kid Cudi's wearing a dress on Saturday Night Live. So there's a worldwide war on men. We need to replace it with a worldwide war on women. And so I think that's 2 minutes. So that's my opening statement.
You got it. We'll kick it to Hake for the final statement from the yes side.
Well, thank you, Modern Day Debate. Shout out, everybody. Brittany is right. It is an attack on white men, especially. Happy White History Month, everybody. White History Month is for everybody. And next month is Men's History Month, August, founded by Jesse Lee Peterson, who founded Bond, which is rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. And we need to rebuild men. I think that the war on men is really a war of good versus evil. And it started really not just 100 years ago, and that's true, but also in the Garden of Eden. The serpent went to the woman and told her, you could be equal with God. You could get the knowledge of good and evil. And unfortunately, the man listened to the woman. And we've been making the mistake of listening to women ever since. And you see the attack on Trump is really an attack on men, because Trump is a honest, straight, white Christian man of truth and power and love. And they hate that. He's too real for the phony politicians, too real for the liberal media, too honest for the politically correct academics and phony intellectuals. And he's just a simple man. And we see just as with Christians, with white people, with the elderly, with the less educated, men are closer to common sense. They're less easily deceived and deluded and controlled by way of this phony idea of like victimhood and gossip and rumors and slander and division and stuff like that. Men are more even keel by and large. And so that's why there's an attack on men, because there are a whole bunch of evil people who want power. And so it's a war on men, but it's really good versus evil.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening as well. If it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, folks, I want to welcome you no matter what walk of life you are from. We host debates on science, religion, and politics. We're a fully neutral platform. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button as we have many more juicy debates coming up. With that, for organizational purposes, on the left side of your screen, as mentioned, namely Stardust, Radical Coder, and Doobie, plus Hunter Avallone in the very middle, they are taking the no position, namely saying that there is not a war on men. We'll kick it over to them for their openings as well. Thanks so much. Stardust, we'll kick it over to you first. The floor is all yours, and thanks for being with us.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start with, is there a war on men? No, but there should be. Men make up 49% of the population, yet commit 84% of violent crime. No, I'm just kidding. Do men have, I'm joking, by the way, if that wasn't, do men have issues they disproportionately face? Yes. Some examples are higher suicide rates, higher homelessness, being sent to war more often. However, none of these examples are issues that none of these examples of issues that men disproportionately face are examples that benefit women as a result. There are plenty of ways in which men's lives would be better if they weren't made to conform to unhealthy expectations as a result of gender roles and toxic masculinity. However, in none of these circumstances would it be easier being a woman. Women still deal with the same gender roles, the same toxic masculinity, just from a position of less power, so it causes greater harm. That's my opening statement.
Thank you very much. We'll kick it over to Radical Coder. Floor is all yours.
Hey, so I honestly think even having this debate in the wake of like Roe v. Wade being overturned and also several centuries of women literally being considered property, it's kind of a joke, but possibly a good opportunity for a more accurate reframing of what's actually going on here. So in short, I'm taking the position that if there is a war on men, which is an incredibly loaded phrase that is kind of disrespectful to actually like people who are actually dying in wars, like around the world. But regardless of all that, if there is a war on men, I'd say that it's being waged from the side of our debate opponents here. I think that it's in pretty poor taste. Again, sorry, it's poor taste to call it a war, but I would call it an antagonistic force, at least, that you're waging on men. And this war or antagonistic force is waged by enforcing rigid caricatures of what a real man is. Sometimes he's reduced to his chromosomes or his penis when it's rhetorically convenient, as I believe happened a couple times in these opening statements, and more importantly than just his chromosomes, but also how he should engage with or be engaged with in society. There are these very rigid standards that men are supposed to be held to. And men are, of course, not unique in this sense. This is something across all genders. So men who attempt to meet these often incredible aspirations almost inevitably fall short, facing ridicule and ostracization. Hard word, simply for not living up to the toxic ideals of masculinity, of which there are many. Does that mean all masculinity is toxic? Of course not. Not all cheese is Swiss, and not all masculinity is toxic. And that's not even to speak of the men and women and non-binary people who actively aspire to different gendered ideals that are outside of this of the many toxic expectations that we place upon men. And these people face even more, if not, I mean, sometimes even more, quite often even more social and often familial backlash simply for their gender expression. So my question for my opponents here is, why do you hate men?
You got it. We'll kick it over to Doobie for his opening as well. Thanks for being with us, Doobie. The floor is all yours.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? By the way, I don't think we did a mic test.
Oh,
Hello?
Sorry about that. And yes, I can hear you. And your mic is actually very good, right where you're at.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So there isn't a war on men. I think what's happening is our societal understanding of the roles available for men and women has expanded. I think it is true that the doors have been opened for women in spaces in our society that are, they'd be traditionally discouraged or flat out excluded from. I think it's true that because those doors are open, some women are walking through those doors and taking spaces that would otherwise have been occupied by men. I think it's true that the inclusion of women in those spaces has affected the culture in those spaces, right? And you're seeing like shifts in the culture of the workplaces that they're in, the cultures of the even like governmental institutions that they're in, because we're now including women. But that being said, I think that the men we see falling out of favor or losing out on those opportunities in those spaces are actually the sorts of men who lack the testicular haft and rigid backbone to take those opportunities for themselves. I think these are men who we wouldn't want to have these positions. I think that if you're having trouble competing with women in fields dominated by men, maybe they're just not good at living their lives in the masculine ideal. I think there is no war, but there is a competition, and some men are losing. And if you have trouble competing with women, when men have been competing with other men for millennia, I think if the introduction of the weaker sex is what causes you to fall off the wagon and spend your days jerking off into your waifu pillow, you probably just weren't cut out for the competition. And maybe that's where you belong.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening statement. And we'll kick it over to Hunter Avallone for the opening from him as well.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on, by the way. So when people say, is there a war on men? Right away, the word war implies intent. I don't think that there is some intentional cabal of women or feminazis trying to attack men in any way or in any shape. I think that what's happening, however, is that there are certain social expectations that are placed on men that actually end up being toxic to the man. So, I mean, I know people aren't probably going to believe me, but I am a man and I care about men, okay? And so it makes perfect sense that we would all want to see men succeed in this society. And unfortunately, what we have right now are expectations that are rigid, that demand men behave a certain way, that ultimately leads to a psychological negative impact. This is why it's called toxic masculinity. Not because masculinity is toxic, but rather there are expectations of masculinity that are toxic to men. And I'm sure we're going to get into all that and more, but just quickly to summarize, even Brittany in her opening talked about men, they might be more willing to lash out. That is literally what happens when men repress their emotions and are told that in order to be a man, they must be stoic and strong. They are actually more likely to lash out. They're more likely to commit suicide. And they're also more likely to just be sexist. I mean, we live in a world right now where I don't want there to be more men that end up like Nick Fuentes or Edward Lindsay or any of these other cucks, to be honest. I want to see a world in which everybody lives a better, happier, healthier life. And that starts by addressing these societal expectations placed on men.
You got it. Thank you very much. And with that, folks, we're going to go into open conversation. Want to say, if you happen to have a question for the Q&A, which will follow the open conversation, put your question into the old live chat here at Modern Day Debate on YouTube with @ModernDayDebate, or you can use a super chat. We put those at the top of the list. And with that, thank you for our guests. We're going to kick it into open conversation. The floor is all yours.
All right.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me jump in here. So, I guess I would start with what Doobie said about how girls are filling up these spaces where they weren't allowed in, and now men just can't compete. I mean, that might be true, except for the fact that the standards are having to be lowered in order to accommodate quotas for women. And you see this in the military, you see this in the police in particular. It's the best example where they have to lower the physical fitness standards to allow women to get in. And you see this in a lot of major companies. They have quotas for how many women they have to hire, how many women, for example, some of the major stock indices like the NASDAQ, S&P 500, they have set quotas for how many women need to be on the board of directors of the major company. So it's not a question of competition. It's as though it's something happening naturally. In a state of nature, men are stronger than women. And so if it was ever a competition, men would just beat the shit out of women, but that's not allowed. And if it was a battle of competence, well, men would also win that competition. So that's why they have to lower the standards. That's why they have to have quotas. That's why they have to have HR and, bureaucratic society change the rules. So that also answers the Hunter Avallone point that none of this is happening with intent, that it can't be a war because there's no intent. Well, what do you call all these policies that are trying to socially engineer the society for more so-called female representation? That's intent. That's the lack of competition, which you said that there is. So right there, I mean, that's completely debunked.
Yeah. Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I maybe diverge from like my debate team here, and that I don't think that progress for the sake of progress is a good thing. Right? I think there are spaces that are probably just better occupied by males right? Like I think that's just a reality. So I don't agree with lowering fitness standards in the military to accommodate for women, right? Unless there's like a good fucking reason to do it. But unfortunately, I think in the United States specifically, there might be a good reason. And that reason is that most young men in the United States are physically unfit for military service, right? So I think this is just like, this might be the result. I think there's definitely a push on, the lefty side to get women into the military for reasons, I guess, Yas Queen shit, which I think is really stupid. But I think that on the other side, you have the pressure of just the physical realities of the population what we have.
Well,
can
I cut in here?
Yeah, go for it.
So basically what Nick said here about them lowering the statement or lowering the requirements for the military was actually just not entirely true, or at least he gave only half the story. So what actually happened here, I know you can do your cute voice, but I would like to explain why what you said was bullshit, please. So what happened actually was that the military had the exact same physical fitness standards for the last like 50 to 100 years. And then recently they changed them. And after they were changed, we suddenly saw a huge decrease of women that were able to succeed, as well as older men, and as well as Navy SEALs. So other good elements, other strong people who were necessary for the military were also failing these courses. So there was an investigation done by Congress. They came to the conclusion to change some of the standards ever so slightly to not just accommodate women, but to also accommodate other men. So that's the first thing that you got completely wrong. The second thing is everybody talks about the military and acts like, oh, what are women going to do on the battlefield? 10% of the military is actually ever going to even see combat. What the military is it is a institution that exists to protect this country, and that relies on innovation. And it turns out that having women right there with you in the military benefits innovation, it benefits thinking skills, and there have been military studies already that have demonstrated that women, when they are on the same team, when completing certain projects, actually complete those faster and more efficiently. So this idea that like everything's just being lowered to allow the poor women in is just not true, at least not in regards to the military at all.
Hunter, who's your favorite female inventor?
Really? Is that actually your question right now?
Yeah, I'm just curious because you said that women are, the military is not all about combat and they have to innovate. So give me an example of like a female inventor.
Yeah. What was her name? I can't remember her name, but she was the one who invented the frequency hopping technology, right?
Yeah. What's her name?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Like, like Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla or like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg.
Wait, hold on. Wait. Nick, if I ask you to even name, Nick, if I ask you to even give me a female name off the top of my head that you actually know, then you would not be able to give me an answer. So for you to try to get somebody,
because there are none. Because there are none.
Because I'm not arguing got a restraining order against you. I understand that, but like this is actually your response to me. I just explained why everything you said was factually correct.
But Nick, I think so it's true. I think that, if we're being honest, it's much more difficult to pull up a female inventor's name than it is like males, right? Like obviously.
Wait,
I think
say that again.
There's reasons for that.
Yeah, I think it's if we're just being honest, it's much more difficult for the average person to pull up like a woman inventor's name, right? Obviously.
Why do you think that is?
By the way, it's Heidi Lamar.
Well,
it's not because women don't invent things.
But I think there's probably I would say the same about like an Indian inventor or like a Chinese inventor. I don't know any fucking of those people off the top of my head, but they probably exist, right? And I think that the reason for that is probably because we have a kind of a patriarchal society traditionally, and this has lifted up the achievements of men and kind of diminished the achievements of women, right? So I don't think it's that crazy.
I think that just
also women just typically haven't been involved in that process for a longer period of time. So
they're involved
women do have some they do have some catching up to do for sure. And
you could say that.
Women weren't really allowed into those industries as much
they weren't
either.
allowed
so
into them.
Acting like it's just blamed on the patriarchy, I feel like is I mean, if you want to say that,
it's obviously like a mix of factors, right?
Well, yeah, but like women weren't really allowed in those institutions, so
it's part of the patriarchal like issue, right?
I think another thing here is that we're kind of pretending like there wasn't like massive ingenuity throughout like housewives, like throughout the Industrial Revolution and the time since then, that like there's been massive advances in household appliances, and a lot of these things happen because wives or women, as we know them, were working in these houses and doing a lot of intense labor and figuring out better ways to do things.
What
and solving
appliances
problems,
did women
which women are
invent?
really good at, actually, it turns out.
What appliances did women invent?
They literally invented
I mean,
the
I'm
technology
not
that you
talking
are
about-
using in order to spew dumb shit on your computer, my dude.
You just said that women invented labor-saving domestic appliances.
Well, I'm not
such as
saying
what?
I'm saying with what
they
they
created
invented
and
generally.
patented. I'm not saying they created and patented brand new technologies and then they sold these off. What I'm saying is that women were working in the households doing most of this labor, and they are problem-solving people, or they're problem-solving creatures because they're people, and people are problem-solving creatures. And what we do is we solve problems,
So
right?
you're saying
And so
they
if you're
didn't
dealing with a lot of
invent
different problems throughout your day, you're probably going to create interesting systems to solve those problems. And women have done that all throughout history, just like men have.
Right.
And
They
then
just
now in
didn't
the
invent
workplace, they
anything.
continue to do that. And in your and earlier, hang on real quick. And earlier, when you were trying to hammer down that like, oh, we've had to lower all these standards, the only example you could bring up were physical standards, and you were even wrong about those.
That's
I
not
didn't
even
say
true,
that.
though.
I didn't know.
He was not
no.
wrong about those things.
Yeah,
And
I wasn't
according to
wrong
Andre,
about
was.
that.
Wait, yes,
apparently, yeah.
I literally have debated Nick Fuentes' very good friend who's probably participated in several different gay orgies with him, John Doyle, and yes, he tried to give me the exact same talking points,
true,
and then
by the
guess
way.
what? He
Wait,
completely
I just came
Hunter,
back from the gay
real
orgy.
quick,
So you act
wait,
like-
hey, everybody stop. Hunter, why
That's
do you
part of
keep
the
on doing
attack
all
on
these
me.
ad hominem tags?
Oh, I do ad
like
hominem
everybody's
attacks to
gay
people.
Typical female.
And a cuck. I know, but what's your deal? I mean,
Well,
what's that all about? You
Sure,
just
I'm
keep on
more
going
than happy
after
to
him.
explain. When
Why
I
don't
talk
you
to
just
Disavow.
actually
people who come here
debate
and
instead of doing
I
that?
think
I
we're
mean,
getting.
what-
I think we're
Alex,
getting
you
derailed
sound
by
like
the
a woman
invention
right now.
stuff.
You're
I don't
getting very
really.
offended.
I
Stardust
don't
is
see
Fine,
why.
I love
You
women
look like you're
too.
gonna start
I wanna give
crying.
Stardust-
No,
hold on, folks.
No, I'm not. I'm
Do give me
happy.
a
I'm
second.
saying
I do
just
want
like
to give Stardust a chance in just a minute. So, Alex, I can give you 10 seconds, then we got to kick
Yeah.
over to Stardust because we haven't heard from her at all this entire time.
No, that's fair. I just don't know why Hunter does all these personal attacks. I mean, we're here to debate a subject, and you're just going
Because
after this
there
guy
are people
personally.
here that
It
I've
just
wanted
shows
to
how
attack
She's a
personally.
woman.
I know it
Yeah,
just
that's
shows
a
how
red
triggered
flag.
There
you
are people
are.
that have
Yeah.
attacked me personally,
Adam,
so I'm
You're
going to attack
using your
them back
emotional
personally.
brain.
All right, I hate to
so
do this.
Wait, you're the
just
one
being
getting
very
emotional and
Don't
triggered that I
make
made a
I'm
couple
not.
jokes.
I'm not
All right,
triggered
we're
at
gonna
all.
kick
I'm
over
just
to
trying to call
Stardust.
you out.
You sound
It's different.
triggered.
We're going over to
Are
Stardust.
you on your way to
I'm
like a
not.
safe space? Calm down,
It's all
buddy.
good.
Adhom, yeah, moderator. We got
Typical,
some adhoms.
typical
We're
men
Stardust.
being
Get a yellow
emotional.
flag,
Am I
yellow
right?
flag in the
Typical
chat.
men being emotional. I guess I think we're getting a little bit derailed on the invention point. I don't really think it's that relevant. I think we can all acknowledge that women have not been in like specific work industries as long as men have. So there's more catching up to do. And even if there were women inventors, those inventions aren't really going to rise to the top and get noticed a whole lot. But I still don't think that changes the fact that just because women are now entering certain work industries that typically they weren't allowed to enter previously, that doesn't mean that that's a war on men. Men have always, the issues that have disproportionately affected men have affected them prior to women entering those workplaces.
Yeah, so
I don't
the
think they
point,
need to. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. You haven't gone. Yeah.
I don't think that the women belong in those workplaces. They don't need to be doing all this inventing stuff. Yeah, every now and then they can invent something. But one of you guys pointed out that it's hurting women. This decline of men is hurting women. I think that was Stardust. It doesn't benefit women, and that's true. And propping up all these females, you see in college admissions, the blacks always say, oh, white women benefit the most from affirmative action. And so it's not just military and police where women are getting propped up. It's everywhere. And there's this kissing up to women, and it's not good for them because they end up miserable later in life when they've wasted their lives trying to compete with men.
When you
Who
say
cares about
That's
that?
not necessarily true. Women who stay at home rather than working have like increased rates of depression, increased rates of of health problems, economic instability, things like that. So it's not necessarily true.
Yeah,
well,
build
one
on-
wrong doesn't
really quick to
justify
build on
another.
what
There's always going to be evil in the world.
To build on what Stardust just said, You're correct, Stardust. That is true, that women oftentimes experience depression and anxiety, whether they are staying at home, like stay-at-home moms, or whether or not they have entered the workforce. So this idea that like women are going to be miserable, or what Hake said a minute ago, women just shouldn't be inventing stuff, bruh. Really? Okay, but at the end of the day,
point of what I was saying
tend
was
to
that.
be miserable because men are not men.
Wait
I
a
would like
minute,
to just
guys.
finish.
The point of what I was saying is that.
Stardust, excuse me. Women are depressed because they're all going to hell. Okay, hell. The dirty little fact is that hell is filled to the brim with women.
My dude, women are depressed because they exist in the same world as you. So can we get back to my point?
That's whether in the workplace, or that's
Let's
whether
go back
in the
to
home.
Stardust.
Yeah, well,
And
I
then
just
I
want to
wanna
say
kick
this
it over to Brittany.
before we kick it over to Styles. I'll say one other thing. The reason I brought up inventions is this: whether it's a military combat, or it's innovation, or it's the big companies and the stock indices, the point is that the sort of elevation of women is artificial. It is deliberate. It's intentional. Because that was the claim, is that the displacement of men by women in some places is just a natural evolution of society. And I said, whether you look at military or you look at the boardroom, you've got quotas, you've got standards being lowered. It's social engineering. This is not laissez-faire. This is not just something that's happening as a consequence of competition. This is by design, and it's being, and clearly, if standards are being lowered and quotas are being raised up, that's clearly intent. And it's something that is negative towards men and positive towards women.
But
So that was the point.
That lacks nuance. So like, for example, you're right that there are some cringy companies that actually do have quotas for like, we must have this many women, we must have this many black people. And that's fucking cringe. I agree with Doobie that diversity for diversity's sake is probably not a great idea. But this idea that it's all being socially engineered is bullshit. I mean, we're seeing women succeed in college, for example, even more so than men. That is very, very natural. It's a common thing that's happening. And if we want to talk about things that are socially engineered, I mean, we can look on the other side of things. Why do you think there are so few women in positions of like STEM or mathematics or scientific research? The reason for this is because growing up, they are socialized to not be believing that they are actually as smart or as good at those types of subjects, when in fact they actually are.
Hold on, before we go over to Hake, I think you had something to say, but I do want to hear from, to be fair to Stardust, anything you had in that last point. And then Brittany, we haven't heard from you for, I think, the whole debate. So Stardust first, and then Brittany, if you have anything, I want to give you a chance to talk after Stardust goes.
I mean, I guess I would just say that, again, I agree with people saying that, that diversity for the sake of diversity isn't necessarily a good thing. Like filling quotas, I find is kind of cringe. And I do think that there are going to be certain careers that men gravitate to and certain careers that women gravitate to. I mean, we can see this in countries where there's more gender equality, that even in countries with more gender equality, women and men diverge even more in career choices. And that's fine. But I don't think that means there's a war on men. Women entering the workforce is not something new. Women have always been involved in the workforce. They just haven't been involved in the same industries as men. This idea of women being stay-at-home was never really true, right? That was something that was available to very privileged people who could afford to do that. And oftentimes those women who stayed at home would have working woman working with them in the home. So yeah, women have always been involved in workplaces, and them entering these new workplaces isn't necessarily a war on men. If men can't keep up with what Doobie said, the weaker sex, their resumes don't measure up, then maybe that there's an issue that men need to fix there.
Brittany, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just think that women entering the workforce has also been a huge cause of the divorce rates skyrocketing and the breaking up of the families, which I think has led to a lot of our societal downfalls. But I'm going to yield my time to Nick because
let's go. See, that's a pro man advocate right there. Saying, hey, we'll give the platform to the man. Right on, Brittany. That's why we love you. That's why we love you. Yeah, well, here, I mean, we're just sort of all over the place. The point is that men are being displaced by women in the society, and it's by design, and that constitutes a war. And that's happening professionally, educationally, culturally. It's not just, nobody's talking about. Nobody's talking about this because they're setting quotas. If they're
Other than
setting quotas,
other than a couple cringy companies that set quotas, which we all agreed are cringe.
Do you know what?
Else
you know
is
what the
happening?
stock
What else is
indices
socially
are?
engineered to happen?
There's quotas and it's not just a few companies, it's the biggest companies in the world. It's in the federal government, it's in the military, so-called female representation. So you've got it in the private sector in the economy. You have it in the universities. And then you also have it even in you have it in movies and TV shows. There's quotas about how many, even when Biden was distributing the last batch of COVID stimulus, it was in the bill. The provision was that the so-called underserved groups were going to get first access to the money. And one of those groups, aside from ethnic and religious minorities, was women. So women were literally able to draw from public stimulus funds before men because they were considered, they didn't get as much money.
Yeah, I mean,
the first draw.
We can talk about
it's literally
there,
everything.
But
by
hold
design.
on, wait. When you say there are quotas at companies or at the government you brought up, it's my understanding that is not at the expense of men. It is rather having female representation is also something that is important to benefit the overall function of the business.
You know what a quota
of
is?
The government. I know what a quota is, but a quota doesn't mean that it's at the expense of not men.
How
means
could
that they
it not
might
be?
set certain standards to make sure there's also adequate female representation.
Explain to me what a quota is.
Hold on. No, I'm trying to make a broader point here. The thing
you have to
that you keep
explain what it is.
The thing that you keep forgetting is that when women are part of companies or the government, those companies, the government, whatever they're a part of, it flourishes. It does well. So
on what planet? If companies, hey, think about it. If companies flourished because of female representation, they wouldn't need to be forced to accept a quota. If women made companies thrive, companies would just bring them in just because.
Not every female hired is part of a quota.
Yeah, not every female hired is part of a quota.
That's not how it works.
And Nick asked what evidence there is of this. There's literally over there's over 3 decades of research showing that when women are part of firms, whether that be banks, the military, any kind of a large group, they absolutely benefit that company. This is why some of the top earning companies across the world literally are out earning companies that don't have women. The companies that are the most successful are also companies that have more diversity and more women. The companies that are not as successful are lower in regards to the amount of women they have working in that industry. So this idea that it's all just a quota is not true necessarily. Again, I agree that diversity for diversity's sake is unnecessary, but acting like every woman in every position is somehow there because of a quota is not true. It's probably because, partially at least, women benefit significantly in working in those firms. They benefit those firms.
Also women nowadays are overtaking men in education, right? So I mean,
because education is a joke
being
now.
Better. So.
Education is a joke now, Stardust, because they rely less on standardized testing now more than ever, and also because there is a bias towards women in admissions. And Hunter, I would ask you this: it's a very simple question. If women were such a value add to the companies, why would the stock indices, why would NASDAQ, why would S&P 500 mandate that for a company to get on their listing, they need to have a minimum number of women on the board? If women were such a boon, wouldn't companies who are profit seeking, wouldn't they naturally hire as many women as possible so that they could have an edge?
No,
why would they need to be required to have women if that were the case?
I'm explaining.
Well, then answer the question.
I'm trying to right now. This is the exact problem with women being put in a place where they have less privilege because they are perceived as being irrational. They're perceived as not being as smart or as available for the job. And I see Nick and Hake right now nodding their heads. I mean, we have two of the most irrational chuckle fucks here on the panel acting like it's actually the women who are somehow irrational. Not only has that been disproven repeatedly, but it's because there are biases that exist, obviously. If people have been raised to believe that women are the quiet ones who should stay at home and it's the men who are the big tough thinkers, then they're probably going to be more likely to hire men, even though hiring women actually benefits their company more.
That's why they have to be forced to do it. That's why they have to be forced to do it, is because
Nick,
it's so self-evident.
You're just reinforcing, you're just showing how strong sexism and patriarchy are. You're just showing how strong it is. It overrides rationality. It's broken your brain. Like it's so strong. It's so strong that even companies will actually make less profit just because there are sexist underlying mechanisms in their fucking brains. Like that's how bad it is. Yeah.
Well, I want to say this. Hey, let me say this. So I don't know if everybody in the panel will agree on my side, but I also think there's a war on women. You know, I was talking about the trans community, and you look at the amount of people that are on the hormone blockers, and you look at Leah Thomas, who got to compete on the men's team and then transition their sex and compete against women. That's unfair to women. So that's a direct war on women, and that's done to feminize man. So that's a war on man that indirectly the women lose because of that. So I think the trans agenda is a huge war on men, the buck breaking. And I don't think you how could you argue that? You don't think the trans community?
Because
how is the trans community not a war on men?
Hold on.
I don't think that's
women,
the topic here.
Biological males who transition to women identify as women. It's not as if they're like, please let me just be a big, strong man. And then, I don't know, they go and inject them with hormones. These are people who are living their lives freely in America,
so you think
the
cutting
land
off
of the
a man's
free.
penis?
And so
you don't think cutting off a man's penis is a war on men?
I think the trans issue is going to be something we're getting derailed. I think we
that's a war on men. The amount of men that are being transitioned to women is an alarming rate. I think that's directly a war on men. The amount of young children that are being encouraged to be transitioned.
If we transition to the trans issue, I think we're going to have much more divisiveness in this panel. So
Can I just respond to what he said and then I'll drop it?
Well, this is what I'm saying. Look, we have created new language called birthing person. You can't even say a mom. So that's a war on women. You can't even say a woman. You can't even say a pregnant woman. You have to say a pregnant birthing person.
Cool. I want to give a chance to Doobie in particular, if you had anything that you want to say on this. I think you had an opinion on this.
Yeah, a couple things. Can I finish really quick, James? Just really quick. I'll be like 30 seconds.
If it's like 10 seconds.
Okay, yeah. What you see here are biological males who are deciding to transition because they want to and because they've been already clinically confirmed to have gender dysphoria. This idea that this is some covert attack on men is literally not true. You see the opposite. Second of all, men killing themselves, that is more of an attack on men. And right now, men kill themselves at way higher rates because of negative social standards and expectations that are placed on men. That's all.
But they decide to kill themselves.
Men follow through and women don't. That's why.
Yeah, they decide to kill themselves, just like they decide to become so-called women. That's not.
No, it's that one is irrational and one is actually confirmed by medical experts.
No. I really want to hear from Doobie. Okay. I think he had something to say.
Yeah, I just want to clarify Haig's position, actually.
All right.
Because earlier you said something like, women are, they're going to end up depressed and miserable at the end of their lives because they've tried to compete with men. But I think at the start you also said that they are basically forcing their way into fields that were traditionally dominated by men, right? So is your position that they can't compete with men, or that they're going to end up depressed, or that they can compete with men and that's the problem? Like which is the issue here?
Both. They're getting propped up. They can't actually compete with men. They're getting this
in any field
preferential treatment. By and large, I mean, the exceptions to the rule, but they're getting preferential treatment by female-minded liberals and female-minded rhinos.
Well, I'd agree that in some spaces, obviously, like affirmative action or like gender quotas,
it's de facto.
Like
it's more than just written down.
I don't think so.
It totally
I think
is.
they're well, I can't deal with your feelings. I can't deal with your feelings. I can deal with what's written down.
No,
what's written down is that in some places there are gender quotas, like Nick brought up, right? Here in California, for example, I think, off the top of my head, we had like a law that was passed recently, a regulation that was passed recently that requires all corporations above a certain employee count to have like an LGBT person on their board, for example, which is a little bit fucked up, I think. If you're a person like me who doesn't like this kind of forced diversity shit. But what I'm curious about is there are institutions, right, where we commonly see women today, even dominating those institutions, where historically they actually weren't even allowed access to them. For example, women couldn't be school teachers until there was a shortage of men that required them to hire women, right? Shameful. They couldn't be lawyers, for example, right? So in those, back when this was the case, right? So women were literally restricted from becoming like school teachers. Would you say there was a war on women back then?
No, not at all, because they don't really belong doing that. Right now,
they don't belong teaching children?
Right now, education is catered to little girls, and it's It's designed to.
Hold on, to be clear, your
destroy
position
boys.
is that women do not. The position of a woman is not to instruct or to teach children, to raise children.
Maybe young children, but not
School children.
Maybe very young children, maybe very young school children, like kindergarten, first grade.
Okay, so
but
when they
beyond,
were
like, third grade,
they were
they should be
institutionally
men.
kept out of these positions, there was a war on women happening, right?
No, that's not a war on women. That's ridiculous.
But earlier you guys said that when there's intention to keep a group out of a space,
I didn't say that.
or to diminish their presence in a space, this constitutes a war. This is what you guys are using to say that there's a war on men currently.
That's not what I said.
No. Oh, so okay, then what are you using?
I said that there are roles for men and roles for women. Men,
I understand that you
men
think that.
belong to be. Men should be leading. Women should be following and listening and being quiet. And men shouldn't be listening to women.
So
in
it's
all
funny that
cases,
and right now we
right
have
here. He tries to say that.
Hold on, you can't think of a single man out there who should be following and not leading, or a single woman that should be leading and not following.
No, of course. I mean, there's always going to be like a pecking order, and somebody has to take a position in a.
Sometimes
like a
women will be above
position.
men in the pecking order, right?
No, never. That should
No.
never be allowed
Never?
to happen.
Right.
No, never.
Even when they're just better, they're better suited for the
They're
position.
not.
They have a
That's
better
literally
personality.
impossible.
In
That is
education,
literally impossible. No, they're not.
You can even look. You can
No, they're
even look
not.
at you can
Stardust,
look at
excuse me.
medicine. You can look at
Excuse me,
medicine.
Stardust,
Female
no. I would
doctors
never
have
like
better
a female
outcomes for their
doctor.
patients than male
Oh,
doctors.
please. If I had a female
32,000
surgeon, I would rather take a
patients
bullet. I would
would-
rather just
would be
get
alive
mercy killed.
if
I'd
they
rather
were-
get taken
if
out
they
in the
were cared
backyard
for
and
by
shot
female
than have
doctors
a
over
female
male
surgeon
doctors.
operate on me. I would never hire a female lawyer. I would never hire a
Yeah.
female doctor.
It's
When
okay.
my
You don't
mom
have to.
told me, she was like, I have a financial advisor I'd like to introduce you to. It's a woman. I said, forget it. I'd rather bury my money in the backyard.
there are
Excuse
studies
me,
on this.
Stardust.
Comparison of
Story.
hospital mortality
think
and
so.
readmission rates for Medicare patients treated by male versus female physicians. Female
Well, that's
physicians
Medicare.
had better outcomes by far.
Those are
But you're
Obama. That's
comparing-
Obama healthcare. So that's trash to begin with.
So
I
it
disagree.
doesn't
All
matter.
means
What
are
I think
discussed.
that
Stardust
All
is
the
means.
greatest
demonstrating is actually-
doctors in the world are men.
So what? What Stardust is demonstrating is quite clear that having a female doctor literally results in better outcomes and better
I
care.
disagree.
Would you
I
agree
disagree
that
with the
women are
study.
better
You
at taking
disagree
care
with
of
the
people?
study.
I
Okay.
absolutely I do disagree with that. They're maybe good at
Have you
taking
even
care
seen
of babies or the elderly, but in terms of precision surgeries and being a doctor, no, I would never trust a
The
female
studies say
doctor.
otherwise.
I think there's
I
I think a
Nick
really
would
good
literally
example.
rather
Look
die
at
of
people's
cancer than have a
experiences
female
otherwise, too,
doctor
like-
treat him.
One
Go
from
to the
Alex,
study.
just to be Alex. We haven't heard from a while.
Well, I just want to say, I think a good example is Megan Rapinoe. You know, she kneeled for the anthem. She gets a, Presidential Medal of Honor. And the women's team that she was on actually lost to a 16 and under men's team. Yet they still got
Yeah.
equal pay when they're a
Boys.
lot less than, they can't play and keep up with even 16-year-old boys. So we know they're not as good.
Wait, is that the one where they
athletically.
played against like half the team and it was a practice round?
And they beat their ass. Yeah, they beat them.
They
like
play, wait, no,
12
they
to
played
2.
against, but they only
Yeah,
played.
look it
was,
up.
like,
They
like
kicked the
they're
girls'
sparring.
ass.
Yeah,
I know,
no,
right?
I'm familiar.
Yeah, I
with
know.
this. They
You're
played
trying to
against, like,
justify.
this-
You're trying to
No, no,
justify
no,
the
no.
Olympic
Alex,
women's team
please.
losing
I
to
barely
children,
talked.
though,
I barely
Ryan.
talked.
I get it. You can't
I'm
just.
serious.
You just can't
I'm
handle the
serious. I
facts.
swear to
But
God.
I get
Okay,
it, Ryan.
that's
They got
fine,
their
but why-
ass
Well,
beat.
I
yet
think
they
we
wouldn't
can
be
agree.
paying
Wait a
attention.
minute.
Can
I
I
think we
say
can
that?
agree
We got
that
too much
there
of the interrupting.
inherently there are some things that men are better at, and inherently there are some things that women are better at. I'm not
So should
against
they
like
get paid
the
the same,
biology, the
Should they
realities
get
of
paid the
biology.
same?
I
I'm
don't
saying
think
if
so.
a
But
woman
what I
is
would
less
say
good at that
is
same
that-
thing, should they get paid
that
less?
again,
Alex,
If it wasn't the
make
full
better
women's team is my
physicians.
point, you know?
They make better teachers.
Excuse me, Stardust. No, they don't. I don't think so. The greatest teachers in the world, professors, are men. Philosophers,
This doesn't matter.
mathematicians,
Gauging from
you know?
history
in
when women
terms
were kept
of
out of those
surgeons and
positions,
doctors.
dude.
Hunter, the biggest argument for war against men is your negative canthal tilt, okay, and your squishy
Oh, wow.
face. All right.
Advocating
That-
for
that's
war
my
against
personal
political
opinion.
Finally,
opponents.
man,
Now,
I
as
Not
think
far
against-
as-
not
now, as
right.
far as
to do
men-
it.
As far as men and women, I agree with you, Stardust. I agree with you that girls are better at very specific small things, such as having kids, and men are better at literally everything else.
No, this is
But
a
as
lie.
far
right
as
now.
Literally
the war
I'm gonna
against
get to,
men,
I'm gonna speak.
Literally
literally.
everything else,
Hey,
really.
I'm gonna
Everything
assert my
else. Literally
masculine
everything
else.
dominance.
Got him, dude.
Okay.
For example,
I'm gonna assert my
examples-
masculine dominance and cut in here. So
okay, yeah, go ahead.
here's a study. We'll go ahead and see if Nick Fuentes all of a sudden just decides
why
to
did you
randomly
say it like that?
disagree with random
Why did you
data
say
sets.
my last name
So
like
here-
that?
Because I thought it was funny. So these findings emerged from our largest data set so far, encompassing 15 countries and more than 1,000 large companies. So we have international data here, which found that the greater the representation, the higher the likelihood of outperformance. Companies with more than 30% women executives were more likely to outperform companies where this percentage ranged from 10 to 30, and in turn, these companies were more likely to outperform those with even fewer women executives or none at all. So when you have women in proper positions, your firm, your company benefits. This has now been demonstrated in over 1,000 companies. Nick, do you disagree with that?
Yeah, that's fake. That's correlation causation fallacy. It proves nothing. No. Have you ever worked with women before?
You're actually hysterical. Wait.
I've worked with lots of women.
Before I talk about if I've ever worked with women, do you understand that it's almost? Do you understand that
are a complete disaster in the workforce?
Totally
they cry all the time.
Some of them are.
They're like babies. They get sent home.
Do you understand that unless you can do something,
they have their period.
Sexual assault.
They have their period once a month.
Nicholas, please. Do you recognize that unless you are literally looking at something like in a lab or under a microscope, it's virtually impossible to actually prove causation?
Yeah, you're not demonstrating that. Yeah, you're not demonstrating causation at all.
I'm not trying to.
Yeah, you literally are. You're saying that
you
women.
Don't understand how anything
You're saying
works.
that women being in the workforce means that the companies perform better. Well, maybe they perform better for other reasons.
This is really sad. I'm very sorry for you.
Go ahead, explain it then. I will be happy to. What are you trying to demonstrate?
It's virtually impossible to prove causation. So for you to try and hand wave this as, yeah, but it's just correlation, not causation. Yes, I know. The point of the matter is there is a significant rate of correlation with over 1,000 companies that have high percentage of female executives. That high correlation is the proof. That's the evidence right there. You cannot demonstrate causation, so you go with the best correlation.
You're saying it's impossible to prove, dude. You just come across like a retard right now. You're saying that it's impossible to prove your point with your own study. That's how it works.
Nick, you made a good point when you said retard. No, here, let me say this point. Let me just make my one point. If you actually look at the rates of autism, it's much higher in men. And there's obviously some externality. There's a reason why 1 in 30 children are born with autism, and it's more likely men than women. So the externalities that are causing that are done on purpose are actually making men retarded. In a higher rate.
You know, interesting,
women.
Alex.
So
Women are autism in women is drastically underdiagnosed.
That's actually very helpful.
It's extremely understudied, autism in women historically. It's been a huge problem, and there's probably been a notable rise in women being diagnosed with autism, as I understand it.
Like,
so are you saying that? Ryan, let me ask this question.
Autism has to do with this conversation.
Because there's medication that's probably causing
more
that.
than one person.
No, it's because it's being recognized.
Medication is causing autism.
There's just to be sure
because it's being recognized. It's not because of some medication.
Hold on 1 second. I'm still talking.
Sorry.
So just to be sure that people aren't speaking over each other, that way they can actually hear you. That makes sense, right? Okay. So Alex, what did you have?
I just want to make the point. I think there's externalities. We're on YouTube. You can only say so much that are causing that. There's a reason why in 1980, the rate of autism is a lot less in 1980 than it is in 2022. It's in 1 in 30. And Ryan, you can say more women are being diagnosed. Sure. But men are still diagnosed at a much higher rate with autism than women. So I believe that is a war on men having more children autistic ever in history. But you guys can disagree with that, but I'm just using stats. You guys like to use stats. I'm just telling you your stats.
Wait, Nick, you're going to call out Alex, right? Because that's just correlation there, not causation.
I wasn't paying attention, but either way, your study is trash.
Well, what he just said was that it was correlation. It wasn't causation. So you're going to call out
like I said, I wasn't paying attention. I was reading the live chat.
It's very convenient for you.
But to rewind here, to take it back here a step to the original point, I think that it's quite simple, actually. To return to the initial point, is there a war against men? Men are being displaced. Nobody on the other side has disagreed with this. Men are being displaced.
Well, I would say that if we're going to say men, wait, Nick. No. Okay. Because you said this so many times.
Can I finish
over and over.
You said this moderator.
Let's let Nick.
Fine.
Thank you. Finish.
Agreed.
Thank you, Stardust. Thank you so much, Stardust. I appreciate you. So some people on the panel, on the opposite side of the panel, will concede that men are being displaced. That's what I think Doobie said, is that he says it's happening organically, and Hunter said it's not happening by intent. But I mean, I think there is enough concession on the other side that this displacement is occurring. Now they are saying, well, that's natural, or that's a good thing, but they're saying it's happening. Well, what's more, if we acknowledge that there are quotas in place in the military and in the private sector and other places, we're saying that the displacement is not completely organic. There's a debate about to what extent it's organic. Is it largely organic? Is it not very organic? but it is to some extent being engineered, and it is artificial. And I don't know how that could be perceived as any other way. If men are being displaced by design from private sector, government, receiving benefits, all the education, all these kinds of things, how could that be perceived as anything other than women being elevated in a way that's not organic at the expense of men? And it was talked about earlier about how are the quotas? How does that constitute a war against
before
men?
Before you go on to another thing, can I respond to the?
I want to make one last point.
Okay.
One last point about quotas and why that matters. If the quota says there has to be a minimum amount of women, what that means is if there was no quota, you would hire the most qualified people. And if that means 100% men, that means 100% men. A quota means necessarily you have to discriminate against men. Now, if there was no quota, maybe you'd get women and men, maybe you get all men. But the quota is in place to ensure that if there was a qualified man versus a less qualified woman, the woman would be selected. That's like by definition what it is. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a quota. If you're just hiring the most qualified people and let the chips fall where they may, you would get any kind of distribution. But if there's a quota that says there's got to be 1 or 5 or 10% women, that means you're going to have to discriminate in favor of a girl against a man, and a man's position has to go to a woman. So if this is and by the way, it's not just about that. That's the principle that's animating the society. You're not listening. That's a principle that's animating the society.
I mean, schizo rant has gone on now for a while.
It's not. Do you know what schizophrenia means?
I want to engage what they're saying
It's necessarily a war against men.
I think Doobie actually has been raising his hand for a while, but I'll give it to Doobie, but after that, I would love to get in as well. So.
I would too. Yeah.
Hi. Okay. So Nick, I see what you're saying, right? But I think that you're not taking into account the kind of like a cultural like inertia, right, of these changes. So I'm an employer, right, being like totally semi-transparent. And something that I do, right, when I need somebody for a CSR position or like a receptionist position, is I will look for a woman with a hot voice, right, because they're more pleasant to look at, more pleasant to talk to on the phone than you or me or Hunter, right? It's just gonna be a better experience for the customer generally, right? So that's what I'll look for. Right. So if if my business were to be looked at by somebody who were to look at my hiring practice, like, hey, you're not hiring men for this position. You're hiring lots of, attractive women with attractive voices. That's not fair to the men because some of these men might be more qualified. So maybe we need to put in some kind of quota so you're not, unfairly dismissing men in this position. And I think that's what you're seeing in some of these places where there's some inertia in terms of like women being allowed in these spaces, but there being like a culture within these workspaces that is excluding women for one reason or another. Maybe just because a person can't imagine a woman being their lawyer, for example, or their doctor or their drill instructor or whatever the fuck it is, right? And that's enough for them not to be hired into these places. So they put in these quotas to try to combat that. And I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think I'm mostly against that sort of thing, but I wouldn't say that constitutes a war against men. That seems like it's more there was a war against women, and now they're trying to undo the after effects of that war.
Yeah, I just disagree with the extent, because what seems to be happening is to a varying extent, the other side is conceding that these things are going on, but they're saying, well, these policies, which you're kind of acknowledging are discriminating against men. You're saying, well, that if this were happening maybe in a vacuum, it would constitute a war against men, but it's happening in the context of it's correcting for an historical.
Yeah. It's correcting it's correcting my discrimination, for example, right? My discrimination against men is being corrected or would be corrected by forcing me to hire them over women sometimes.
I think that I guess, I want to answer this point. I want to follow this line, which the fundamental disagreement then is what is the role of women? Because if you see the role of women as basically equal to men, then probably there is some truth to this. If you think that women are in fact equal to men or should or ought to be prescriptively equal to men, then you would say these policies are necessary to correct historical iniquity. I would say that women are not in fact equal, and I don't think that women then ought to be. I don't think it should be prescribed that women should be equal. So I would say that there's no such thing as a correction. Things were fine as is. I think that's the basis of the disagreement.
I actually agree with that. Yeah, I think this is why the studies don't really matter. I think that if I were on your side, for example, and someone presented me with a study saying, hey, allowing women to the workspace increases production by 10%, I would say, well, hey, yeah, for that 10%, we're sacrificing some kind of like damage to our culture or society, right? And that's not worth the 10%, right? So yeah, I think it is way more fundamental than we're talking about right now. I think there is like a principal disagreement as to the role of the genders or sexes or whatever.
I think that's
good point.
Probably
it's ill-gotten gain.
I think
it's
that's
ill-gotten
probably
gain having
true
women working like that.
Because I think that I just think that we're talking so much about these quotas here, but like we're acting as if this or men going to work or whatever is like their only position or role in society, and I don't agree with that at all. I think that, I mean, don't we have some tradcons here? Don't we have some people who value traditional families and whatnot? Part of that is also providing for your children, not just financially, but also emotionally. That's also being there for your kids. And so this idea that like men are being displaced to simply have more options for roles that they too can fill, I just disagree with this. I think that if a woman wants to go to work and the man is better fit for staying at home with the kids, then there's nothing wrong with that. That shouldn't be laughed at or mocked at all, because men can be just as good caretakers as women and vice versa. Mm-hmm. I think that sometimes we're getting too hung up on like these this is your role, this is their role. And I mean, isn't this what started the whole conversation with toxic masculinity? The toxic masculinity crap is literally because we try to place men within certain roles that result in a harm to their own well-being. That should be a problem for everybody here who actually cares about men.
Yeah,
well,
I'd like to make this point.
Extremely...
Dude,
go ahead, Alex.
I just want to make this quick point. So we talk about a lot of women complain about the double standard that if a woman sleeps with a lot of men, she's a slut. But if a man sleeps with a lot of women, he's a coxman. But there's a huge difference. If you're a big fat woman, you can get laid all the time. If you're a big fat man, it's almost impossible to get laid. So women have it easier in that sense. You can get laid much easier. So that you can consider a war on men too, because it's harder to actually find somebody to bang. So, unless you're a homosexual, it's kind of hard to actually, date and get laid in this day and age.
Well, you can always talk to Hake or Nicholas about that, but I think that the big problem too is
incel,
that
so you're right about that.
I would say
that, I mean, look, I would say that in general, though, even if that's true with the case that, women can, if they want to, sleep with a lot more men will be willing to sleep with a woman. That isn't in general, usually that's not what women want, right? So like while women may be the gatekeepers of sex, men are the gatekeepers of relationships, right? So I don't think that's a really good comparison. As far as like the roles of men and women, I think we can all acknowledge that like there are some realities and that men are going to be inherently better at certain things. Women are going to inherently be better at other things. But with it, let me finish. But there are going to be deviations. There's going to be plenty of deviations. There's going to be plenty of men who are also good at things that women are good at. Typically, there are going to be plenty of deviations where women are good at what men are typically. And that's why I think it's important to have a society in which people can kind of go outside of their typical roles on a regular basis, right? What if you're just not happy in that role? What if you're just better at something else? There are going to be plenty of outliers naturally. But
what is something that you think women or men are naturally or inherently better at?
I mean, I don't think that, men are just physically larger than women on average, right?
Yeah, they can be larger. That doesn't necessarily mean that
and
they are going to be
stronger.
Inherently better at certain things.
Well,
right?
I mean,
any physical labor job. So you're telling me a carpenter, you think there's a female carpenter would be better than a male carpenter, Hunter?
Well, what if the female carpenter in this case was stronger than the male carpenter?
Okay, so but we're getting off the point.
On average,
that's not my point.
That's not my
point. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is not my point. My point was that it doesn't really matter, right? Because there are still going to be deviations in that, and there are going to be people who are not happy. There's going to be the dude who's not happy doing typical dude things, and there's going to be the woman who are not happy doing typical woman things. So I think we need to have a society where people can reach outside of their roles and on a regular basis and really decide for themselves what their life is meant to be. And so, like, yes, there are going to be things that we'll see trends, typically more women gravitate to, more men gravitate to. That doesn't mean that we don't create opportunities for people to stretch outside of their roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Nick,
I think having good defined gender roles and actually accepting that would be better for society. And I think the war on gender roles is a direct war on men.
But
Yes.
certainly, Alex, you must
oh,
recognize that
God.
gender roles are created by humans, right?
No, men follow God and the women follow the men. But right now it's
Bingo.
women following Satan and men
wait.
following after the women
Hake,
for
which
sex
God?
and all that mess.
What was the serpent shaped like? Okay, well, I'm just asking. The serpent looks like a fucking penis. Okay,
Oh,
can we
God.
just acknowledge
Hake.
that for a second?
Hake, when you say we're supposed to follow God,
What?
which God?
Wait, Nick, can I ask? Please, let's not do the religious debate. I'm begging you.
I'm
Nick, can I ask
I'm
you a
just
question?
trying to. I feel like I'm not getting a chance to follow the line of logic. With
Men
anybody
tend
here
to
on
be
this
more
panel.
conservative than women. Just look at the voting patterns because they're more logical. They
Fortunately.
follow God.
How is
Real.
being more logical connected to following God? First of all, men
God
are not more
gives good
logical than
sense
women.
to-
That's been debunked like 50 billion times. So
No,
you
we
should
don't.
really
No,
stop
it's
saying
not.
No,
that.
it hasn't. They rationalize evil. They're not more logical, or they would be just as conservative as men.
Wait. Okay, how come?
but
Okay,
Hank, the issue is that-
we're getting away from from the fact if you can say whatever about like women following evil or whatever, it's still the fact is that 84 men commit 84% of violent crimes.
Right.
That's just the fact of it.
And those men tend to have had angry women and not fathers in their lives.
Why are women not
fathers.
making up for that?
They're all
percentage?
black.
But that makes hold on.
Right.
What you just said, Hake, is actually
No.
extremely telling. If they don't have fathers in their life, it's important that people growing
That's a
up have two
failure of the
strong
man.
parents. When there is not a father, do you know why a lot of fathers actually leave their households?
Because they can't deal with the women.
No. Largely or
Yes.
not, the large proportion is because they feel inadequate. And that actually is part of the problem with toxic masculinity.
Part of the attack
when
on
you
men.
have men who are unable to form healthy relationships or bonds with other men, they are feel very uncomfortable opening up and actually expressing their emotions or what they're feeling to try and actually deal with that to move on. What you get are people who bottle up their emotions. They start to feel inadequate. They don't know how to deal with it, and then they fucking leave their family. So
No,
I mean,
your
I agree with
diagnosis-
you that like having a parent leave would be a terrible thing. It's really negative for the upbringing of the children. But like you trying to reject the fact that there is a societal reason why men leave the family, not always,
It's-
not 100%, but like
Hey,
we could
would you
start
say
by
the
addressing
one-
that.
It's not the mere
Hey.
fact that before you ask that question, Ryan, it's not the mere fact that the man leaves that the child goes crazy. It's that the woman is so angry and the man's not there to protect the child from the mother.
Well, you want the father to be with the family, right?
Yes, and the father should
Okay,
be the leader,
so
not
if
the simp,
fathers
not
are
saying, "Oh, she's the boss."
If the primary psychological like function behind why men leave their families is the feeling of inadequacy, by further working to make it so that men are more accepted to speak about their feelings and express themselves, you will see those rates drop.
No, that's
You're literally
womanly
in
thinking.
favor
You
of the
don't.
same thing here, my friend. You're just offering.
I want to.
You're just offering.
No,
the-
but you're misguided.
No, no.
I get that you may have good intentions, but you're misguided. So,
I mean-
like you said, the war on men is not always intentional by the useful idiots who just listen to women and listen to Satan. But
So hey, so these men who are
evil
these
is
men who are
more.
leaving.
Go ahead. Evil is
well,
more
the men who are
clever.
leaving. I just want to know if the men, if you would consider like the men who are those men who are leaving their families and like for the reasons Hunter described, or whether or not you agree with those reasons. Like those men, would you say those men are like not real men? Like they're not like living up to like what like a real man should do in that situation?
Correct. Yes. And it starts it starts from a very young
okay.
age.
Yeah, go on.
It starts
Okay.
from a very young age. Even conservative Christian males will be like, "Oh, she's the boss," and they'll be allowed to think they're in charge and not say she's the boss, but they're
Doesn't the
hooked on
Bible say
sex
to
or
do that,
comfort.
though? Isn't it important in the Bible to respect your wife?
They're hooked on. No, she's supposed to respect her husband. He's supposed to love the wife. They're hooked on sex and comfort instead of God. And the courts are taking the children away from the fathers, by the way. And the women are turning the children transgender. They're just not
Oh my God.
independently. They're just
not how
not
it works,
independently.
I need to cut in
deciding
here
be
again. I'm sorry. This is just
transgender.
so important. I think that
Go
Hake
ahead.
isn't even realizing that he's actually like complaining about problems that are a result of toxic masculinity. So why do you think it is that men consistently get fucked over in the courts, especially in the family courts? It's because of the unfair idea, the stereotypical idea that, oh, well, women are just naturally better caretakers. They're just naturally better moms. This is why even if men or the man in
In the
question
old days, it
is-
wasn't like that. Did you know that?
This is why
In the
even-
old days, men got in a divorce, but divorce was rare back then because we weren't allowing
because
no
women
fault
couldn't
divorce.
function in the world without
yeah,
a
In
man.
the
property
old
can't
days,
leave, right?
men took the children. Look it up. It's true.
Well, I don't know how the court systems worked then, but I know that the way they work now is that even when you have a man who is actually more qualified to take care of the kids, it's way more common for the woman to still get the kids, and that is
that's the war on men.
And
that's a war on men.
Wait,
and this sounds autobiographical.
Hold on, wait, no.
It sounds
Nicholas, you're forgetting the fact that the
way.
reason that's happening is due to toxic masculinity.
No, that's because of toxic
Yes, it's
women
this idea that men need to be the ones
kids.
working. Men need to be out doing this. Men don't know how to take care of kids. Meanwhile, it's just the soft, flowery women who need to take the children. Even
Stop
if she's
saying
not as
whammon. That hasn't been funny in years. Arguably, it was never funny.
Nice.
Also, it sounds autobiographical.
Are you gonna
because
crap on my joke, or are you gonna respond to
like
myself?
well, I'm gonna trample the joke, and then I'm also gonna respond. I'm just wondering, are you a stay-at-home dad? Because this sounds like eerily autobiographical. Sounds like you're just kind of talking about your life here on a soapbox. Are you a stay-at-home dad? I'm just asking.
No.
No? You sure about that?
I've been home with my kids before, but I also work 5 days a week.
Don't you drive a minivan or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do drive a minivan. You made fun of me for that.
You drive your luxury.
Well, I like how
minivan.
I live the trad life while you live the mad life. I do think that's cute.
I don't think having kids out of wedlock with a baby mama is the trad life.
Wait,
Maybe
I'm
that's
married.
trad
Wait,
for
wait,
like
can
black
I just
people.
lay something out really quickly? I have
okay.
I have 2 kids and I'm married. And by the way, all my kids, I'm
Were
pretty
you
sure
married when you had
hold on,
the
wait,
kids?
I'm pretty sure all my kids and my wife are like 100% Aryan, okay? So
Were you
we're over
married
here
when you
living
had
the
the
fucking
kids?
trad life while you're
But
living
they're
the
not
mad
white on the
life.
inside.
I go to bed with
asking,
my
though.
wife
Wait,
in bed
Hunter.
next to me. You go to bed
Hunter,
with your
wait.
anime pillow and a fucking dirty sock.
Your
so
wife
shut
is
the fuck
ugly,
up.
so I
Start
would
actually
rather the
addressing
dirty
what
sock
I'm
than your
saying.
wife.
You're
We gotta get
coping
back
really
on track here.
attractive.
Come on,
Come
gentlemen.
You're coping so bad right now.
Let me
dude.
ask
Can
you,
I bring
wait,
it back to the
I
men being
wanna
displaced
ask,
thing?
Wait, but were you
In a
married when
minute,
you had
whenever
the
you're ready,
kids?
This is
yeah.
what's
Were
so
you
funny is
married
when
when
I-
you had
Let's
the
go
kids?
to radical coder just because we want to redirect it.
Appreciate that. So I made a couple notes about the whole men being displaced thing because I wanted to talk about that. I think it's an interesting framing of the situation there, because you're talking about a situation where obviously like women were not permitted into the workplace before, or at least not like recognized as part of the workplace when they were there like doing labor. They weren't like really considered because they weren't allowed because women aren't supposed to do that or whatever. So like to say that like when they became allowed that this is sudden like mathematically it is displacement, but this using this term like it feels dishonest like to because like what we're talking about is people who wanted to work and we're told that you're not allowed to. And I think this is like the fundamental thing that's come up again and again is like a lot of it's like people wanting to do things and you guys saying no, you're not supposed to want to do that. And I think that's not good. And I'm gonna elaborate on that a little bit more. Because I think someone Doobie and Nick at one point were talking about. I think it was Doobie and Nick. We're talking about how like the issue is like what we think the roles of men and women should be. And honestly, I don't give a fuck what any of you believe the roles of men and women should be. What I really care about is if you think that you can use your opinion on that to impose it, especially with any sort of state force on people. I think that's fucked, and I will fight you on that. And that's my position.
Okay, well,
So given,
go ahead.
okay, so I think that I'm actually really curious as to Nick's answer to the thing that I posed earlier. Because what I brought up in my like opening statement, right, was that I think there is like a failure among a lot of like modern men. Right, I think a lot of modern men are like easily offended, indecisive beta males who go bald at 25, peddle white guilt while white knighting for like trendy social issues. They pay to see used up tits on OnlyFans. They're afraid to communicate their desires. They're the kind of people that never stood up to the school bullies, right? These are like weak people. I would say the weak people. And these men, maybe it's because, we don't need to work with our hands as much as our parents did. We aren't faced with this kind of hardship that they were. It's a lot easier to live today. So you end up with like a lot of people who are just like softer, I think, than we'd be traditionally expected to be exposed to, right? Mm-hmm. So given that these guys exist, right, and they exist in a place where women are, have been, I don't want to say unshackled because that sounds really soy. They've been allowed into spaces they're not traditionally allowed into, and they're not competing very well. A lot of them are making excuses for why they couldn't do this thing or that thing. They didn't get that job, this job, and they just fail. Right. So given that these guys exist, like what do you do with them? Like, is it if they're the guys that are losing out, and I think they are, why is that just like it doesn't seem like these are the people we should have in traditional masculine roles because they just can't fill them right now.
Well, there's
and I don't know how to like retrain these guys.
Well,
So it seems like we just need to accept that there's another kind of men now that exists, and we need to find a place in society for them.
They can grow up and overcome.
We need a place for betas.
I think that part of the reason is too, like, people talk a lot about like the war on men in regards to like testosterone dropping, right? And now we have so many beta men. And you're right, Doobie, when you say that now because of the developed world, it doesn't demand that men are out working hard labor jobs nearly as much as they used to. But again, there are also even natural reasons and reasonable explanations as to why testosterone rates are dropping as well. So I just don't like this framing of this is some kind of an intentional thing to fuck over the men. I mean, I think
that's not my framing.
No, not your. I'm not saying your framing. I'm sorry. I'm saying to the other side. Sorry.
You're on our side.
I do think that if we are in favor of not seeing men kill themselves at higher rates, we should be willing to look into why this is the case. Why are men killing themselves at higher rates? Part of this has to do with the fact that there are expectations placed on men that are unhealthy. This idea that, like,
I'd like to
disagree with that, actually.
I just like to make the point I said earlier. Men actually follow through, women don't. But there's one point I want to make too. When you look at female teachers that sexually abuse their male students, they actually get less punishment than a male student that actually rapes, one of their female students.
I think that's wrong.
So right there,
that's super
that's true.
But that's not
true.
like an intentional thing.
True.
Like, let's
no,
that's
true.
No, I know it's true. It's true.
It's
true. No, I know it's true.
Wait,
I'm saying it's
on.
wrong that they don't get as much. I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's a war on men. So you let
that's
men
because
get
all
sexually
women are
abused.
pedophiles, so and they can't.
I'm
help
saying,
themselves.
so you let men get sexually abused and punish the women less than if it was the vice versa, a man molesting a girl. So I think that's pretty obvious. That's a war on men right there. And then we also, but I want to make this last point. I want to make this last point too. And we need to talk about the abortion issue right now. Yep. When we have abortion, that you're killing men. That is an attack on more men being born. And the fact that these people want to abort babies up into 7 days after birth, that is a direct war on men. And you see the people that are complaining the most about Roe versus Wade getting overturned are the same people. Even if you categorize everybody and you survey them, even people that are pro-choice believe there should be a limit when abortion should happen. But our politicians are actually trying to get abortion all the way up to birth, if not past that. And that is a direct war on men.
Yeah, it's killing the man's
Can we get
child.
Nick to answer my question, if that's okay? Yeah, Nick, can you? So what do we? So I think you'd acknowledge that these guys exist, right? I think you probably think some of the people on the panel right now are those guys, right? So what do you do with these guys, given that they exist in our society and we need a space for them?
Well, I think that your question presupposes that this is something that has simply happened. I don't think that it's simply happened. I think it's the result of some things that are by design and then some things that have just been neglected. Because you see in other countries, like China, for example, which I like China. China recently put a ban on how many hours people can play video games. In other Asian countries, they have a ban on pornography. Certainly, these are two measures that could be taken that I think are going to change the kind of men that you're getting in the society. If there's a limit to how much television, screen time, video games men are getting, if porn is restricted, if drugs are prohibited, you're getting a completely different kind of male. And so your question almost presupposes that you have men that are like this, and this is just how it has to be. I don't think it has to be that way. I think that, and then conversely, where men have been displaced in the society, largely you're seeing this in the interior of the country, where you have a lot of ghost towns that have been hollowed out because of deindustrialization. And so the men can't find jobs. And what you'll find in a lot of these small towns in America is the highest paying jobs in the town will be the hospital, the school, and the women will fill the jobs, and they'll get the government salary and the pension and the benefits. And it's sort of emasculating men. And so the point is, this society didn't come from nowhere. This society was created, and some of it was intentional and some of it was unintentional. But I think that in order to correct, we've got to understand, and to answer Hunter's question, why are men killing themselves? It's not because there are too many expectations. It's probably because there's not enough expectation. And so the man is sort of an individual and out there in the world and being heaped, all these things are being heaped upon him. Oh, you got to be strong, but also you got to be weak. You got to be nice, but also you got to be assertive. And so I think that to answer both questions, we've got to create a society where men can flourish as men, and their sort of relative relational position in the society, which is the husband, the father, the caretaker, the soldier, the priest. That's what we need to create for men. And I don't think it's inevitable. Don't get me wrong. Technology has introduced, and urbanization and technology has introduced a special circumstance, but I don't think it has to be this way. And other countries like Russia, China, others, they're trying to at least facilitate a more traditional society, even in a modern world.
Even when you say that, like, the men who aren't finding jobs or something are like emasculated, like, this is part of what we are talking about, is that at its core, masculinity doesn't need to be reduced to just you are the provider. If you are in a situation where it makes more sense for the wife to go work and you are home with the kids, you as a man, being a masculine man, are still a provider. You are just providing something different for the overall benefit of the family. These are called traditional values, Nick. I don't know if you've heard of them, but
there's nothing
this is
traditional about
unironically
that.
like an important.
It's not just.
This is an important part for the topic of toxic masculinity. When we talk about these ideas of what it means to be a man, and now all of a sudden, what do we have? Maybe we have a dude who got fired from his job or got injured at his job and is unable to work. Now all of a sudden, societies are telling him, and Nick is telling him, that he is somehow less of a man. He is not masculine enough. And I don't think that that's right. I don't think that's fair at all. I don't think whether or not you are a man or how masculine you are should be hinged upon whether or not you're actually the one providing the finances. I think that should be left more up to a family dynamic. And this is why families benefit more when they are a little looser than this. And this is why, again, men's mental health does better when they are not forced into these rigid gender standards. Lastly, I just want to address what Nick said as well. We need more expectations. I'm not saying expectations in general are leading to men killing themselves. I'm saying that the expectations in regards to what it means to be a man that are toxic are leading to men killing themselves. The toxic expectation of, you are a man, so you must not show weakness. You are a man, so you must not cry. You are a man, so you must be the provider. You must be making all the money. If your wife makes more money than you, then now you're less of a man. You're emasculated. All this does is worsen the mental health of men, and also makes it so that they are more likely to actually carry out violence or tolerate violence against women. So the entire all of society.
I want to say this.
See, listen.
I'm not getting cut off yet. I'm not getting cut off yet.
It's all a joke.
Hold on, wait, please. I'm not getting cut off yet. First of all, Nick, it's very cute that you would laugh at that. I understand, since you have no women in your life, that probably is very foreign to you, but still, pretty cringe, my dude.
You should be violent against your wife. Maybe she would make you a liberal.
This literally makes all of society a worse place when we try and enforce this type of toxic masculinity, these expectations on men. And lastly, I'll say, whether or not you like China or not, like, Nick, I think you can at least start by putting some restrictions on pornography on your own phone, and then maybe we can talk about what to do as far as the rest of the country.
That's fake news.
Okay, let me just say this real quick point. So women that make more money than men, they look at them less sexually desirable. And I can tell you why there's you can prove that there's a war on men. You look at Ketanji Brown Jackson, you look at Kamala Harris. They were not picked because because of a meritocracy. They were picked because of affirmative action. So people in this high positions that actually make decisions that affect all of us are being picked because they are a woman, not because they're the most qualified. And I think that's pretty obvious when you look at Kamala Harris's record and you look at Ketanji Brown Jackson's record, and she's easy on child pornography. She's obviously not the best pick for the job. And Kamala Harris, I don't know how lefty you are. If you think she's a good vice president, then you got a hole in your head.
Yeah, but Alex, I think the issue with that statement is, we had Nick, for example, and Hake earlier say that, even if a woman is more qualified on paper, she shouldn't be allowed access to a job, or she shouldn't be able to have a job because it's the man's place to be doing that job. Right? So you're seeing the same thing happen on the other side, and you're criticizing it. And I agree with you. I don't think people should be hired because of whether they have like a dick or a pussy or whatever the fuck. Right. But I don't think it makes sense to criticize it on one side and be in favor of it on the other, right?
But neither of them were qualified. Kamala and Ketanji Brown weren't qualified. They were selected because they were girls.
It's a fact.
Sure. I don't know enough about the qualifications. I didn't follow.
Kamala Harris was sucking Willie Brown's penis. That's how she got that job, and she was dating Montel Williams. Was in a throuple, so she slept her way to the top. I couldn't do that. Trust me, I would if I could.
That's real.
That's interesting. Okay, but again, so you would say that if you had a qualified woman come up for a position, and then you had an unqualified man come up for that same position, you would hire the woman over the man?
Impossible.
She was more qualified.
Okay, so you just hired the unqualified dude, right?
I just don't hire. I would not.
It's
hire
an
women.
imaginary scenario, man.
Yeah, I would not.
It's not that
he has a
imaginary.
fundamental difference in what he thinks the role of woman is.
Well, this also isn't fair because I don't think that Nick is really legally allowed to be in like within 100 feet of women in general.
Oh,
so I just don't know if that's even like a fair thing. Like I get that you would never hire women, but is this some principled stance or is this like what the courts require of you?
I don't want to be within 100 feet of your wife.
Well, you're already not allowed to be 100 feet within the nearest elementary school, so we'll go ahead with that, I guess.
With her highlights and her
jump into
horse face. I don't want to be anywhere near that thing you're sleeping with. But I will say this, funny. Okay? The thing is, I don't think that a woman would be qualified for. I may hire a woman to be a secretary, a receptionist. I don't consider a woman to be qualified to do like a high level.
I don't think you're qualified to do this hiring, to be honest.
Okay,
wait, hold on.
Like who do you?
But she's not qualified. But she's not qualified because she's a woman, right? So like, you're considered. Yeah, okay, I understand.
Doesn't have the faculties.
So I think, and I understand. To be clear, I understand what you're pointing to. Right? So as I said earlier, when I'm hiring like CSRs or receptionists, I will hire a woman because I don't think a man is qualified, quote unquote, for that position. Just because it's going to be better customer experience generally if I hire a woman there. But to be honest with you, right, if I'm looking for somebody to go out to business owners and to sell my product or to contact them about setting up appointments to sell my product, I'm going to hire a man, right, more often than not, because they're taken much more seriously. Business owners are much more willing to let them in the door and speak to them and set up the appointments, et cetera, et cetera. So, and to trust their knowledge on the topic, right? So I'm going to tend to hire men because I understand that about our society, right? But I think that, so I think you're pointing to something real. I don't agree that it's like something that should be perpetuated. I don't think we gain anything by perpetuating that, given that I understand that there are plenty of women who could do that job just as well if she were given the opportunity to speak to the business owner instead of the appointment, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I would answer that. I would answer that by saying
this. And it's not an insult, I promise.
Well, I just want to say this real quick. I think that there's too much emphasis on the other side being placed on society is the way it is because of these biases. I think that prejudice and bias are formed over the centuries by experience. And I think that the reason that you don't see a lot of women inventors, entrepreneurs, and so on, I don't think it's because of institutional bias. I don't think it's because of unfounded, irrational bias. I think it's because of how women are. And I think that that's why historically, in all religions and all traditional societies, women are regarded and have been, there's a secondary role conferred upon them. And I don't think that, we've done away with the sort of legal constraints. We've done away with some of these things where we're trying to correct with these policies. And it still seems to be the case that, women are being pushed in these directions. I think they're being pushed and funneled into wherever possible STEM roles and whatever.
It's literally the opposite.
But you don't see, no, it definitely isn't. No, it definitely isn't. You don't see a lot of women going out there. Women are not risk takers. Women are not extremely creative. Women are not doing the kinds of things that would put them in the top of these hierarchies, like the top lawyer, the top surgeon.
Yes.
They don't have that obsessive,
but you're proving our point
drive.
Right now.
They don't hang out. They don't have that genius element that that men do.
You're proving our point.
And so the point is,
you don't think women have any of these things.
Well, he's actually proving our point. Like if women
and society reflects that, and society reflects that in its natural form. Well, and you say, oh well, and you say that the old order was unnatural. It was these unnatural biases or these sort of put on biases. And without them, women should flourish, but they're not flourishing in that way. They're trying to make it work, but it's not working.
I think we would be, okay, wait a minute.
Can I just jump in real quick? Because Nick has something so woefully wrong here. He's literally demonstrating our point.
Literally.
The point of the matter is that there are certain societal expectations that are not only placed on men, but there are also societal roles that women are pushed into. So it's not surprising that little girls growing up were always taught that they need to be quiet, or, oh, you're going to be a mommy when you get older, whereas their brother was more likely and more encouraged to try STEM, do math, you're more rational, that kind of shit. It doesn't make sense that as that little girl grows into a woman, she's going to make decisions based on the way in which she was raised. Yes, this is like textbook obvious bullshit. Yeah, you're a product of your...
You're just a total fucking idiot. Did you listen to what I said?
You're a product of your environment, my dude.
Do you even understand what I just said?
You're saying that women are choosing not to do these things
What I said is that I said that your side,
and women are still not doing what
you're restating what I said. You're saying you're merely restating what I said.
It's not you guys going back and forth. I do. One is Stardust. I know you said that you had something to say, and then Brittany and
can I have 10
more
seconds?
It's been even longer since we've heard from you, Brittany. If you want to say something,
can I have 10 more seconds, Jake? James, I promise it'll be super quick.
Sure.
All I wanted to say is Nick also made a faulty appeal to tradition. Actually, there are archaeological finds which show at the very beginning of human civilization, this idea that like men are the hunters, women are the gatherers is actually now not true. We've literally found female skeletons holding spears, and they were in the middle of actual fighting and partaking in war. So again, just to make it clear, this appeal to tradition is actually not even correct either.
That's just straight retarded and it doesn't make any sense. Oh, okay, how about you? How about your wife and me with the spear? Let's set that up.
Does it make you feel like you're defeating the argument I just made when you just say it's retarded and then
let's
like
put a spear in your wife's hand and let's put a spear in my hand and let's legally sanction a fight. And if I win,
up my wife, are you?
If I win, she dies.
I'm so sorry. Like, this is absolute. I'm literally getting cancer from this. So I think we can concede that that women have typically not been allowed into certain roles in which they would be like inventors, and maybe women are typically like just not inclined to fall into that field. We've seen it. We know that in countries where there's more gender equality, we have to acknowledge this, guys. We know that in countries where there's more gender equality, that women and men diverge even further in the careers that they choose for themselves, and that's totally okay. That's 100% okay. But what I would say is that just because women are not inventors at the same rate that men are, or that they haven't had the opportunities to enter that space, doesn't mean that they're incapable of it, or doesn't even mean that they're any worth any less within society. I still think that men and women, despite being inclined towards certain things, we still want to provide opportunities for both to expand beyond those roles that they fall into. People are there are going to be tons of outliers in every case, and I'm sure that women, given the opportunity, for the ones who do want to be inventors, that they will over time catch up to the men who have been inventors historically, but they need to be given that opportunity first.
And also, just to really quickly add upon that, I'm not going to be long, but I also think that it's important to recognize societies and civilizations that have equality for women in the law and then actual social equality. Because right now, even in America, what we see is that women are not restrained by any legal obstacles. However, women do face societal obstacles. The way they're socialized and raised and the way that they're taught basically affects a lot right now. So I think that's important to remember, that even in those places that you mentioned, Stardust, where they have more gender equality, I would be curious to see if that's in the law or if
it's even within social settings, right? In countries where they have more gender equality on a legal level and on a societal level, women still will gravitate towards certain careers, men will still gravitate towards other ones, and that's fine. That's 100% okay.
That is fine. I would just want to know how much.
We want people to have the opportunity to move beyond that. And just because there aren't as many women inventors doesn't mean that women are any less in society, and it doesn't mean that there won't be more women inventors in the future.
But society is catering to women. Schools are set up to cater to little girls, and from a young age, they're putting little boys on like ADHD medicine like crazy. Look at the anti-bullying campaigns. They're treating this stuff like they're babying
bullying's a
kids
problem,
and turning them into girls. And they're not showing boys and
what does
girls
that mean?
how to deal with. They're not
like
showing boys how to.
Girl
will you shut up?
In that situation,
they're not showing boys how to deal with bullying and with strength. They're just treating them like coddling them like mothers do, and rather than letting them become men. And you'll notice that the society punishes men for being too manly and speaking their mind. There was one guy recently who was like a radio host, and he said, "Oh, the WNBA, I don't like to watch it." And like he got fired because Twitter and the mainstream media overreacted. And you see case after case of men being lynched just for speaking their mind and being men.
Wait,
they tried to do it to Trump, but it didn't work.
Women too, though. Women, like I remember a couple. I think it was last year. I covered the story
Manly
about a woman
thinking
who
women.
Literally said like the N-word on Twitter when she was
Logical
12,
women,
and
yeah,
she got
freedom of
fired
speech.
for it. So
Logical.
like, is this the war on
Like
women
Brittany?
now?
Freedom of speech, yeah, that's it. It's an attack on the basic freedom of speech. Like what Brittany said, it's an attack on whites.
But you're saying that this was an attack on men at first. And
It
so
is
now
an
you're
attack
saying-
on men. It's an attack on men. Men don't overreact to the N-word. Only women do, and
It was the
female-minded
woman who
blacks.
said the
That's not
N-word.
true at all.
Black-
Okay.
Female-minded
Wait a
blacks may
minute. Wait a minute.
overreact.
Wait,
Wait,
dude, it was the
wait,
woman
what do
who
you
said
think on
the
this
N-word.
panel of the
Blacks
people
and
on
Jews
my
do.
on
Let's
the
hear
people
from-
on
Yeah, and
my
those are
on my side?
female-minded
Who do you think
cultures.
is going
I
to be
promise
more
I'll get
likely
back
to
to you.
overreact to a word? Okay, I'm just going to say sorry, Hunter. Sorry, Ryan. I feel like you guys would be reacting to words a little bit more than so. Let's not play this whole bullshit with like,
But
women react to words and all that.
I don't think we
But they're
know who
female-minded
reacts
males
to
that you just
words
addressed.
more. I think that the thing
sorry?
here is that the woman who was canceled in that case was the one who literally said the N-word.
Literally.
So what?
She literally said the N-word.
You know, Nick, if
Men-
you were actually
We
like
heard him, Nick.
combating all the arguments I was giving and then roasting me, it would be a lot funnier.
You can't be honest about
I
women. You can't
literally
be honest-
drive a minivan. I literally drive a luxury minivan.
Yeah, trad life over here.
I literally drive my out-of-wedlock children in my minivan,
Tried
and
life.
I have a negative
100%
canthal-
Aryan over here,
I
ladies
have
and
a
gents.
negative canthal
We want to go to
tilt.
the Q&A. Brittany, any last words?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know I've been carrying this debate and all,
Yeah.
but I do think
Go, girl.
that Hunter, no offense, you are kind of the exact type of guy I was talking about in my opening. Like you personify the pussification of men. I mean, when you were right wing, you did your hair, had a tan, you dressed better.
That's way
Now,
more girly.
They broke you down. They broke you down into whatever it is you are today, but you're apologetic. You cry about everything.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly what I'm talking about, though.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Let's
definitely
go.
the stupidity that just came from your fucking face definitely has me crying. So I apologize for that. But
That was
Yeah.
very
We'll jump into the
nice.
Q&A.
I'm sorry.
That
My
wasn't
bad.
very gentlemanly.
That wasn't
Don't cuss
very
in
oh
front of a
wow,
lady.
let me get my
Let's
fedora.
jump into the Q&A.
Stunted slime. Get this stunted
Wanna remind
slime out of
folks.
my sight.
Nick,
Couple
don't
of
you?
things, folks.
Can we start wrapping it up? Because I think Nick has a date with his cat boy here soon. So let's go ahead and wrap
That's
this up.
true. That's true.
Like I've
The
been
orgy with
feminized by this
Doyle.
panel.
Wait, did you call me a
I
cat
think
boy?
we've
I'm a
got
cat
enough. All right,
man,
all right,
and
all
I
right.
have
We're gonna jump
toxoplasmosis. I love cats, Hunter. Why all
We're
these
gonna
ad
jump
hominem
into-
attacks?
I
And you know
would
what?
like
I think
Brit-
your wife's pretty. I would
like
definitely bring
Brittany
your
to come
wife.
on after the after the panel.
Let's
Brittany,
jump
why don't you
into-
come on and we can talk for like 30 minutes or so?
Let's jump into the Q&A. Folks, want to remind you a couple of things. In particular, the completion of enjoyment is sharing it with somebody else. Click that share button below. If you think that they'd enjoy this juicy debate, you can share it by clicking that button. With that, thanks for your question. Brandon Hansen says, Nick, I've been a longtime follower of Casey, and he mentions being normal as a key to America First. I can't help but notice the outrageous accusations against you seem to drag America First down a level. I'm a big Cozy fan. Keep it up.
Let's go. Thanks.
This one coming in from Neon Nyor says Burka now. I think that's for you, Brittany. Noah's Ark says Noah's Ark Kansas says there is obviously a war on men, but is anyone going to address the man-sized lizard? Oh, that's right. I think they like your
I don't know what
avatar.
you're talking about.
Are you copying my hat,
Hey.
Doobie? What the hell?
You see, I feel like I've been feminized by the panel. The
Unbelievable.
classification has gotten to me. It's done.
It broke you down.
Ha ha ha.
This one coming in from
What's the
Troll
opposite of
Steven
pussification?
Steen says, oh gosh, I don't even read
Dickification,
it. Google
guys,
Dickdoll.
I'm not really sure.
Says, how did Nick become so handsome and based? You have a fan out there, Nick. Brandon M says,
Thanks.
Hunter is a prime example of the war on men. What is TRT? Never mind. This
Testosterone
is-
replacement therapy.
Testosterone.
Folks, got to remind you, I put it in the live chat. We are looking for meaningful questions that are interesting and not insults at takes, hair, or etc. We want those kind of questions. So
It's okay. You
we're
can,
okay
read,
with
the, you
insults,
can read
though.
the insults to me. What was it? A TRT?
Insults are fine.
they said, get you some TRT. I don't know why.
Testosterone replacement therapy.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, lots of you probably all know like men who are on TRT, to be honest.
Sleep.
But it's funny because though you all know cis men, you probably all know cis men who are on TRT, it would still be refused in a lot of states moving forward, probably more states to trans men who might want that.
How
same,
many people are on
medication.
TRT? Like, what do you?
Why are you wearing
Right.
that glove?
I'm sorry.
Why are you wearing
Well,
that glove?
Because my freaking hands are cold or whatever.
Am I
I
going
kind of like the gloves. I like that vibe, Ryan.
I think it's
it gives you,
I mean,
it gives you a
the super
competitive
chat message
advantage.
genuinely offended me.
Right.
So
Yeah, you should see me solve a Rubik's Cube.
Charlie Snyder says, I would like to thank Hunter for introducing me to Nick, as I've since become a groiper. This one from Lord Bibby says, got that one. Brandon Hansen
I'm
says,
very sorry they've willingly chosen to be a fucking degenerate virgin. I feel very bad for them.
This one coming in from Brandon.
Degenerate virgin.
Beats turning trans.
Says lefties would agree there was more quote unquote toxic masculinity in the past, yet back then there was less men committing suicide and dropping out of society. At the present, there is more equality with women than ever, and men are suffering.
That's actually not true. So you can look back at when there was more toxic masculinity, like in the 50s and 60s especially, and you can look and you can see that the suicide rates were going up steadily. They were really, really increasing. They've taken major spikes up, gone down a bit, major spikes up. People like to appeal to the past, this mystical past where everything was good, perfect, and happy. But if you actually look at the suicide rates and the depression rates of the time, that was not the case. Not at all.
Well, I want to say this. I want to say all the psychotropic drugs, the SSRIs, actually create suicidal idolization. So I think that's the reason for the big increase is all the psychotropic medication people are prescribed.
So does LGBT stuff.
Also, women yelling at us.
Actually, I think it's the antagonism against the LGBTQ stuff that seems to be correlated with the suicide rates. So actually, it's more, again, much like most of this conversation. Again, it's your side who's enforcing the rules.
It also seems like
it's not reality, man.
It does seem like Hake is.
I think it's the other way around.
It does seem a little
they
like
know they're
Hake
wrong.
is,
They're miserable.
Hake is projecting a little bit. I mean, if you and like JLP want to get it on, I think that's more than fine. I think that should be, that's your life. But it's kind of weird when you're shitting on gay people and then, behind closed doors, you're all into it.
You have no idea what you're talking about. You're a gossip and you think like a woman.
Cool.
Real.
This one coming in from Willie Powell says, solid intro, Hake. Happy White History Month.
Thank you. Happy White History Month, everybody. Everybody benefits when everybody loves white people.
This one coming in from Robert L. Brown says, gossip equals if you don't have a glass house, do not cast stones. FBC. What does FBC stand for?
Facebook crew. Shout out to the Facebook crew. I don't know. I'm assuming that's that.
All right, thank you. Gioga says on Twitter for deets on James being a little freak. This is such a nasty woman. Justin KG says, looks like Hunter. Okay, like I said, I don't even know what most of these mean, folks. Some of these memes, I don't know the meaning of them. This base stream at cozy.com, base streaming at cozy.com says, I have a question for the panel.
TV.
No, it's cozy.com.
That's so funny. My gloves almost fell off. So funny. My fingerless gloves.
Appreciate you, buddy. It's nice meeting you, by the way.
Hands.
They say, I have a question for the panel. Why do you think Nick won? And then this one coming in from Lord Bibby says, okay, like I said, folks, why like 99% of these are just insults? At least this one's positive. Martin Blank says, Hake is on fire. He is one white man who is not afraid.
Nice. Thank you.
This one coming in
from
from
more
Brandon.
white men who are not afraid.
Brandon Hansen says, Hunter, you say that women are socialized to not be good at STEM. Are men being socialized to not think they can't make it in college? Are we to blame female elementary teachers for this inequality?
No,
there's an argument.
This is actually hilarious. I know that comment was either written by somebody who has actual brain damage or was intentionally trying to be bad faith, but no, you look at the way in which society works to socialize people for certain things, but the reason that men are not going to college as much now, there are other explanations for that. Absolutely. I think that that's kind of a bad faith question, but funny all the same.
You got this one coming in from Lord Bibby says, gotcha. Ryan Gordon says, women fit best in social customer service realm. Men are best in logistics and physical labor. The world was built by men who are supported by good women. Don't you agree this is a complementary fit?
If that was to anybody, I think that I do think that when people talk about like the patriarch and the patriarchal structure, et cetera, I think they massively oversell the benefits that women have within the system. And in the places where they have power and men don't, right? I don't think we live in a patriarch. I don't think traditionally, even the United States or Western cultures are patriarchates. I think it's much more complex than that.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate your question made by Jim Bob says, Hunter is rejecting an objective standard definition for a woman, a war on women.
There's Does this
I'm
person
sorry,
think there is
can
such a
you-
thing as objective definitions? That's pretty much all I need to know to completely disregard what that person says.
Shout out to Made by Jim Bob.
This one from Martin Blank. Stardust will give you a chance. I think this might be for you. They say there is no such thing as sexism.
That's correct.
I disagree.
This one from Herman
too.
Cain Award says, why do the alphas... Okay, gotcha. As I mentioned, folks, we're really looking for... I do appreciate when we get a meaningful question, it makes it that much better. Vile Van Gogh says, Hunter Avallone says, only a few organizations have quotas, but then they say also, Hunter Avallone says, quote, ubiquitous quotas are good because... ... They say, why not admit error instead of moving the target, Hunter?
No, I said that Nick asked me why do companies not just hire women? Why do they need the quotas? And I responded by saying, because the biases that exist against women can sometimes essentially like, what is the word I'm looking for? They basically cause a problem when the person is trying to hire people. They're more likely to just take men seriously. I don't know what hypocrisy, quote unquote, the super chat message is trying to get at. I don't know. Yeah.
This one from me streaming at cozy.com says, genuine question. What about how boys...
TV, what the hell, man?
Cozy.com's fine. It's good.
Stop it.
That's probably just what it says, though.
There's probably one for
Yeah,
Brittany that
well.
says like, hey, where's your OnlyFans?
Cozy. Sorry about that.
Well, why is that okay, Hunter? You were just talking about toxic masculinity. Now you're partaking in it.
I'm not partaking
Let's
in toxic
go!
masculinity.
Okay, bring it back, Hunter.
You are.
Because-
You're like the
go.
definition of it
It's
right
because
now.
beneath-
That is not
Beneath
toxic
Hunter's
masculinity.
cozy-
That's called a clever
beneath his
insult.
cozy exterior
Well,
Let's
is
just
the
be
fucking-
sexist then.
dusted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they are
Well, at
right.
least get
I'm
your
sorry.
insults correct, you know?
It cuts off the name of the user. So it is base streaming at cozy.tv. Thanks for correcting me on that. And
Let's
it's a
go.
genuine question.
Nothing. I just said, let's go.
This one said, what about how boys in school are given ADHD medicine because they have a harder time sitting still?
They're not supposed to be sitting still. These schools are catered for the little girls and not for boys who, and it's not rigorous. It's like a female-minded coddling that's counterproductive to boys becoming men.
I think that a lot of that situation, like you talk about the girls or the schools being like better suited for girls. I think it's better suited for the way that girls are like taught to be.
Yeah.
But I think that it's bad for all of them, like to not be able to move around and stuff, especially like during lessons. Like kids should be moving. Learning and like physical movement are deeply linked.
Nice.
Like having like stronger memory. You should be moving around classrooms. I think there was a lot of suggestions about that in that like CRT handbook that Destiny trashed about that math class. But it was like just saying that like, yeah, like one of the things it was saying was that like, yeah, like using physical movement in schools is good for everyone, not just for like people of color or anything. So, but anyway, yeah.
This one coming in from, do want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. You can find every single one of our guests down below. That includes if you're listening via the Modern Day Debate podcast. We put our guest links in the description there too. So don't forget to check those out to learn more about their views. PP McGee says, God made women as a companion to man and to do nothing else. Why is that so bad?
I'll answer this. So God, I would love to know which God. They never have an answer. There's no consensus on what God says. All we have are people who claim to know what God says. And on top of this, we actually have evolutionary evidence that we evolved from a common ancestor. There is no evolutionary evidence whatsoever to support the, quite frankly, delusional claim that Adam and Eve were once a thing that existed, that there was actually a talking snake. I mean, we have people here on the panel that say it's the women who are emotional and not as rational. Those same people advocate for a book in which they talk about a talking snake. So I don't know. It's just a little cringy to me. There's no evidence whatsoever, though, for the Adam and Eve story. So whether or not God created women to do that thing, I don't care, because then God should be able to tell us himself.
You're the evidence for the Adam and Eve story. You listen to the woman and you suffering right now.
Yeah.
Bandit
not
Dragonite
listening
says,
to
Nick
the
is
woman,
right.
but
There
okay.
is no a priori reason to believe that women make companies more profitable. Correlational evidence is weak.
Real. Yeah, women, and here's the thing. If women were the secret sauce, I could be a trillionaire by making a company of all these genius women that are just being cast aside by these sexist, ignorant men that just don't see it. But that's not happening because it's not profitable because women, and here's the thing, women can be competent in certain roles, but the one role that women cannot do well is leader. Women are not good leaders. Women are good taskmasters. Women are good negotiators in the sense of, I guess, negotiating conflict. I don't know if they're good like in negotiations, but they're good at negotiating conflict between people. So there are skill sets that women have, but leader is not one of them.
This is not true.
So high level, and also on extremely technical things. So high level positions and extremely technical fields like lawyers, doctors, business leaders, entrepreneurs, politicians. This is why you don't see female representation. It's because women don't like those things. Women aren't good at those things. So, and it is true, by the way, that, women can do some things well or some things right sometimes, but even women that can do high level tasks, they're not suited for leadership roles. And that's why you don't see them on the boards of companies.
This is not
true. As simple as that.
Did you forget the literal thing that I read you earlier?
Did I forget the literal thing?
Listen, hey, you can keep. I'm more than happy for you to make fun of how I talk, but again, wait.
Excuse me, man talking here. I'm a man of the world, and I see how women behave. I've worked with women. I see how women operate.
I don't care what you've seen in your day-to-day life.
I don't care about your study. I don't care about your study, which confuses correlation for causation.
I don't care what you've seen in your day-to-day life. If we were to gauge what people saw in their day-to-day life to come to a broader conclusion, we'd all be sitting here believing the world is flat. It wouldn't just be Alex who believes that.
The world is flat.
Second of all, why are you saying that women are not good in leadership roles? But again, I already read you the study that showed that.
Did the study say that women are good leaders? Did the study say that women are good leaders?
Women executives were more likely to outperform companies that didn't have as many women.
Which does not prove what you're saying.
Women executives, they are in leadership roles, my friend.
Which does not prove what you're saying. Just because a company outperforms another company and there's this arbitrary difference, that does not prove that women are competent leaders. At all.
I would agree with you if this was one single company, but when you have over 1,000 companies that you look at internationally, or over 1,000 employees, it may have been over a couple hundred, but either way, when you have several different companies that are all showing the same result, and the different variable there is that one company or those companies doing better have more women, and the other companies that are not don't, and that's the only variable, then yes, you can come to a reasonable conclusion that women are benefiting these companies. And it can be correlation while it's still being reasonable to believe that.
A lot of these, not holding yourself to a high standard here. I mean, the richest woman in the world acquired her wealth through divorce.
You don't understand.
And there's never been a woman president.
About. You're trying to
and
say
there are no women
philosophers because of what you've seen in your life.
There are no women inventors, and that's because women are just simply not risk takers. They're not creative. They're not geniuses, and they're not leaders. They could be other things, but the evidence. You could give me a study all you want. But the record of history is perfectly clear. If what you're saying is true, where are all the women billionaires that invented all the things? Where are all the women politicians that are leading all the movements? They're not there.
Stupid fucking talking point.
They're not.
We just went over historically how women.
So women invented the circular saw. The aquarium, ice cream maker,
women were not allowed
algorithms.
Let me Google. Tell me what women invented.
I'm not Googling anything. I'm trying to say that women were
Sarah Mather invented the submarine lamp.
Women were kept away.
You didn't invent the fucking submarine. Are you kidding me?
I was just trying
submarine lamp. No, I didn't say she invented the
submarine lamp.
We've explored that.
And telescope on the submarine. Pretty big.
But
Panda Dragonite says conceding that quotas exist because of affirmative action concedes the point. Women will get hired at the expense of men necessarily.
Yeah, and it's a culture. There is these commie capitalist corporations in the globo homo world order that kisses up to women is made so that they can lord it over the men and the more logical minded independent men, because they don't want men to be independent. They want to have this one world government and unify people, and that's what the women want. They want to be taken care of by the government because they hate men.
Hey, I'd like to ask Hank a really quick question. And I know that you guys get really scared when I bring up studies, but I'd like to know what you have to say about this. Researchers presented 6,100 men and women with moral decisions about topics such as lying, abortion, murder, animal research and torture, yada, yada, yada. And they basically found study results demonstrate that both men and women assessed how various decisions might harm others, engaging in similar levels of rational analysis for each moral conundrum. So this is a study that came out that disproves completely that women are less rational.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because look at women are more liberal than men. So it doesn't mean they're more, just because they can rationalize doesn't mean they're logical.
You're begging the question right now. This is yes, you are, because you're baking the answer into your statement. It doesn't make sense at all.
Why are they different?
Because they're liberal,
why are they different?
You haven't explained that being liberal is necessarily irrational.
I don't have to explain that. Everybody on this panel knows
because
that
you're
being
baking
liberal is
it
not
into your statement, which is why.
Not true.
Hold on, wait. This is why what Hake is saying here is actually illogical, unironically.
So is yours.
You're over here trying to say that men are more rational. You just engaged in a logical fallacy, dude. You're not very rational. You're very woman-minded right now. Why are you so female-minded all the time?
I'm glad that you adopted the female-minded thing, because
I'm not.
Because
only for you, I have.
I actually have a question for Hake. If there are people, if there are men who are woman-minded, that means you're chill with trans people, then, right?
No, I mean, I'm chill about it, but it's not good for them to be that way.
If they're woman-minded, then maybe the solution is, a woman's body. Right?
The solution is to overcome it. Hunter Avallone is
overcoming having a female mind.
It's a Satan mind, really. It's not the natural, godly
Satan
female mind that doesn't hate men. Women are that way because they listen to Satan and listen to their intellect and emotions and their imagination and rationalizing evil, like Hunter does, rather than listen to men and not worry their pretty little heads about politics.
How do you think coming to a rational conclusion is done? Do you think it's done by intuition, or do you think it's done by some kind of a looking for greater knowledge? Hake?
What's your question? I don't get it.
What are you defining as being rational? You keep saying women are emotional, but then when I give you studies, you don't want those. Are you saying that men come to an intuitive feeling decision?
It's a dumb study that's trying to deny reality.
So how are men coming to more rational
being able
decisions?
to rationalize something doesn't mean you're logical and common sense.
So how do men become more rational than women? What do they do? How do they come to more rational conclusions?
By loving what's right and not listening to women, for one. And not listening to their emotions and chasing after women.
So if you don't listen to your emotions, then what are you listening to come to a rational conclusion?
Common sense.
Is that not an emotion?
Common sense, which comes from God.
Next one. This one from the Herman Cain Award says, if the left has quote unquote conceded that there is a current war on men, does that mean the right concedes that there has been a war on women for centuries?
I agree that there has been.
I disagree.
A war on women. Well, I know, but I'm just saying, I think there still actually is a war. I think there's a war on both genders personally. And I just think, you can look at the trans movement. You can look at all the women that lost in the NCAA championship, the 17 women that lost. Talia Thomas is a perfect example of men being transitioned to a female and taking away, their rights and their, chance to compete fairly. So I think there is a war on women.
I think I'll amend my position by saying that there must be a constant war against women to suppress them. I think that women are off the reservation. They're totally off the rails. And that's because we ceased. There was a cessation and hostilities and oppression for a moment. There was a lapse in conflict in a brutal war of violence and dominance against women. And now they're naked in the streets, trying to kill our babies, raping little kids in schools, because all women are pedophiles. And so we need a resumption of war against women, a resumption of the eternal war against womankind.
I think you're getting that. I think you're getting that because women make up about 50% of the population. They definitely make up the vast majority of people who can get pregnant. And currently we're filing legislation that limits the rights of people who don't want to be pregnant. So I think that, and most of those people, again, are women. So it seems like if there's a war on any particular gender, one of the things that it might be characterized by might be like, I don't know, legislation targeting that gender and limiting freedoms that existed for like a generation already for that gender. So if that were to happen, perhaps there might be a war currently being engaged. So maybe
I agree. It's just getting started.
Right, so you're saying it's good.
It's just getting started. Right? Yeah, Ryan, I'm saying we're resuming.
I believe you. I really do, Nick. I really do believe you. You're just getting started.
Ryan,
that's right. We're resuming our endless war against women. Abortion's just the beginning, and then it's going to come with skirts. It's going to come driver's license. That's going away.
I think that skirts are inherently
literacy. Nick, your existence is
because there's some cultures where like men do wear skirts and it's seen as masculine.
We're bringing back like a kilt or something.
My dad got married in a kilt.
But kilts are cringe. I don't subscribe to that Anglo nonsense.
Okay.
I don't subscribe
I just
to
feel
that.
like if
nonsensical
concern here is
Anglo
women
traditions.
running around naked.
What
in the
about
streets,
robes? Do you think
like
robes
what
are feminine?
Ryan is saying that
men wear robes.
Yeah, I would wear a robe like an emperor. Absolutely.
But a robe is like a dress, is it not?
No, I think women, the
I think
appropriate
it's
attire
like
is
I think it's
something
different
like
than a
a
dress.
full
We have
facial covering and a full body covering as well.
The important question is: do you wear boxers under the robe, or do you go like commando style?
I don't wear a robe yet. I'm wearing a suit right now, but I am naked. I am naked from the waist down.
It's hot. Okay.
This one coming in from
like
Coffee Mom.
Sorry.
Says Nick, the quotas exist for people like you. This one coming in from John WX 25 says, okay, that's just an insult. This one coming in from for the love of Pete. All right, this one coming in from Neon Noor says, Stardust, men do most of everything. It's their job to carry society. So, of course, some of them end up doing crime to provide for. Women are the bystanders of history.
So we got to up the crime that women do, basically.
Yeah.
They're doing crimes, but they're just not charged for it because what goes on behind closed doors is unseen. We have a culture that worships the mama who's killing the man's child literally in the womb or sometimes outside of the womb. And some of these people are cheerleading it.
But that's just
and then
dishonest phrasing.
they're destroying the men who are more so-called violent and crime prone are being raised by these females who are angry and raising them poorly.
But Hake, you're dishonestly phrasing this because although I'm not actually a very big fan of abortion myself, when you say that like the women are killing their babies, usually in most cases,
not their babies, the man's
whatever.
babies.
In most cases, it is a mutual decision. No. If a woman is going in and doing
very often the men don't want their babies killed, and the women do it anyway. There's no reproductive rights for the men.
I don't have the stats right here on top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that most times it is based on a mutual decision that they come to. It
doesn't justify it.
Well, I'm not saying wait. I'm not saying it's justified by any means. I'm simply saying that your phrasing of the woman killing the man's child.
That's what she's doing.
Is heavily dishonest, I would say.
No, it's not dishonest at all. You have no idea how many men.
I don't care.
You have no idea
because
whether the men are for it or not. They're killing the man's baby.
I just think at the end of the day,
and they're killing the man's baby out from under him.
Hake, I just think at the end of the day, both you and Fuentes are evidence enough as to why abortion should be a thing.
That's cute.
Whoa!
But I think
we should kill babies because you don't like their politics. Is that what you're saying?
You guys are putting
a woman as joke, Alex. I don't know if you're familiar.
I decide who lives or dies.
I've never heard a joke.
Oh my god, that's a joke!
Oh, that's so funny.
Go ahead, Doobie. I want to hear what Doobie has.
All right, what have you got?
I think that turning abortion into like a man versus woman issue is massively oversimplifying what's actually going on there. Like there are plenty of women in this country who are also anti-abortion, right? There are plenty of men who are pro-life, right? So to say that, this is them coming after the men or it's the women, trying to murder the men's babies against his will, I feel like you're just massively oversimplifying this.
No, I don't care though.
I know you don't care about this oversimplification. No, that makes it easier for you to follow along, but you are oversimplifying this issue because even among pro-life people, right? They're going to have most of them are going to have some cases where an abortion might be okay, right? And on the pro-choice side, they're going to massively disagree as to where the cutoff is for where they'd allow an abortion, right? So they might be pro-choice up to 8 weeks or 12 weeks or 20 weeks or whatever the fuck it is, right? So it's not as simple as man versus woman.
No, it is simple of good versus evil, and the men should be leading it.
Okay, you can call it good versus evil, but that's not man versus woman, unless you're just saying that all women are evil, which I guess I wouldn't.
Yes, and most men too. But yes, all women are evil. Yes, most men are evil too. But to pretend that the pro-life women is a good thing, they should not be leading.
I'm not saying it's a good thing.
I know.
To be clear, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just telling you that when you present
the
this
men
as
should be running
a gender
the pro-life
issue,
movement.
It is not a gender issue. There are plenty of women who are pro-life.
No, it is.
You can say it again.
You guys
are
pretending that women you're pretending that women are God, that they decide who lives or dies among the children.
There are many women who are anti-abortion entirely. Right, so to say
that doesn't mean anything,
and there are many men who are pro-choice, right? Pro allowing them to murder these babies, right? So to say that this is a man
males,
versus woman
they're not
issue
men.
Is fine, males, whatever the fuck. to say this is like a gendered issue or a sex issue is just ridiculous. I don't think
it's not.
I think we're spinning our wheels on this one. Check Ma 6 says, how about men in the family court system?
Yep.
Yeah, real.
Getting screwed over.
I think any reasonable person would agree with that. Yeah.
The problem is,
but again, I think
I
think that's a result of the kind of like a societal understandings of like the roles of men and women, right? So women are typically seen to be the caregivers, et cetera, that raise the children.
It used to be that way.
So they get the children, right? Usually.
This one coming in from Based Streaming at cozy.tv says no fault divorce is part of the war on men.
Yeah.
That's actually really quite disgusting if you think that women having the ability to leave their husbands is somehow a war on men. I think that's
actually really quite disgusting.
I think that speaks volumes.
It's gross.
Give him a chance to speak.
I just think that speaks volumes against men. Like, it sounds like you're the one waging a war on man or on men simply with your ridiculously low expectations. Do you really think that a woman having the right to divorce her husband if need be, that's somehow an attack on men? Should women just be forced to be married forever to the man?
Yes, that's what marriage is.
In what
seriously?
Not if you get a divorce.
In what circumstance? Is there ever a circumstance in which you believe that divorce would be justified?
if the church allows it, you can go to the church and get the marriage annulled.
I mean, for the woman
to say that
the
marriage has never happened. No, I think
would
that
we
you
be
should
taking
get married.
Actually getting beaten.
Getting the choice taken away from men too? Then at that
it takes two to fight.
Well, wait. I'd like
That's
to just
right.
add on this really
Would it be?
Hey, equal rights.
Wait. What Nick said is
Equal
very
fights.
relevant here. So right now,
That's what I say.
So right now, I know for the anti-intellectual losers here that it's very scary to bring up studies, but I'm going to do it again. Studies have literally shown
This
that
is great content.
you seem to be getting really mad that I'm just bringing up studies, but studies have already demonstrated that men who partake in these traditional masculine ideas, that they have to be stoic, they have to be strong, in control, are more likely to inflict violence on women. So if there is more violence being inflicted on women, it's more likely that the women who are married to the violent man will divorce the man. So actually, by again addressing the toxic masculinity, which is what I came here originally to talk about, this is going to result in less divorce. Furthermore, Nick, I think it's a little telling that you wouldn't be in favor of a woman divorcing her husband, even if he were beating her every night. Or
That's right. I wouldn't want my wife to divorce me.
What if she were? What if she was like getting raped every night?
Women.
Wait, hold on, I think
marital rape is not real. 1, 2. Women like violence. That's why they all
It's very
fantasize
real.
about rape.
Yeah.
So, boom, mic
hold
drop.
on.
I think
So-
that I don't
so
need
Nick,
to
I think
respond to that.
provoke
I think I'll just let that
Checkmate.
sit there by
I think
itself.
women
And they
fantasize
provoke
about
her,
like a woman
God.
laying on the kitchen
Start
floor.
it.
Let it
Nick,
sit there.
you're Catholic, right? I think you're Catholic.
Stardust,
I'm
if you
Catholic,
said
yeah.
something, we'll give you the last word, and then we got to go to the next question.
Sure. Well, I'm just good because I know. So I was raised semi-Catholic, and I know that in Catholicism there are like grounds for annulment, right? So So and I think that's like kind of like a divorce. I mean, I guess you could call it an annulment rather than divorce, but it's sort of similar, right? So a woman is saying, "Hey, my husband's not living up to his obligations, so I'd like to separate from this marriage." Right. So there is some room for that sort of thing to happen in your worldview.
But it's extremely limited. And what annulment really is, and this matters, is it's as if the marriage never was, which is different than a divorce. And, I'll give you an example. Like I think it was my great grandparents. They separated. My great grandparents was like a few generations back, but they didn't get divorced, didn't get annulment. They were married. They think the one had problems or whatever, and so they just split. And I don't think that it's okay for people to split, but the problem is this concept that marriage is not a sacrament, that marriage is not, people are not taking this seriously as a sacrament. It's just like the abortion thing. Oh, well, they're taking away the rights of pregnant people. Don't fornicate. They're taking away the rights of married people. Don't get married. And if you want to get it annulled, then you got to go to some authority. But the problem is people are, particularly women, but people in general are being given too much freedom and autonomy. That's the issue.
This one coming in from Vile Van Gogh says, Hunter, is toxic masculinity responsible for rising gender transitions? What about January 6th? And do you see, quote unquote, toxic masculinity in the room with you now?
I'm actually glad they asked me that. I thought it was only me that could see the toxic masculinity sitting back there. So it helps me out, actually. Thank you.
Can I also comment on this? I think actually there's a very valid concern that because we've restricted men and women to certain roles so just like we've made these roles so tight that people feel like they need to some people may feel like they need to transition because they don't fit perfectly within their gender role. And I feel like if we are able to expand what is expected of men and women, that will have maybe less people will feel the need to do things to change the way that they present, essentially. Especially when we have we have people, I mean, nobody's going to fit into a gender role perfectly. Nobody's going to fit into the stereotypes perfectly. So
you got it. Samir Farsain says, proof by contradiction, society functioned when all men worked and all women stayed home. Can the opposite work? Could women fight wars, catch animals, etc.?
Yeah, they would suck at it.
Women have done all those things.
I'm sure they've done it. They just sucked at it. They're less good at it. I think it goes back to the analogy of the soccer team. The women's soccer team couldn't even beat a 16 and under team. So we figured out was half the team, right? It wasn't even like a full team. It was just a spar. No, it was their team. Ryan, I know you're trying to make excuses for them, but they lost to children. They lost to children.
Alex, that's quite possibly true, but I don't think you recognize that invoking just an example, like one example, is not evidence that this is the case across the board.
So you think women are physically stronger than men? You honestly, wait, real quick, you honestly think men, you honestly think women would be better at combat than men?
Hold on. I never said that. You're trying to put a position on me that I didn't have because you're backpedaling. Because what you did say,
I'm not backpedaling. Really? I'm not backpedaling whatsoever. No, I'm doubling down is what I'm doing. Yeah, that women cannot compete against men phically in any sort of physical gender role.
The problem here is that you're using one.
There's a million examples: firefighter, law enforcement,
carpentry.
There's a million different examples.
It's getting annoying. Like, you guys, just to talk over each other so much is people can't hear you. It defeats the purpose.
All I was going to say is that you could just as easily find a couple different videos or news articles about men getting their ass handed to them by some muscular woman boxer or some shit. And I'm pretty sure invoking that
you're saying you think women are better at boxing than men?
See how I didn't say that at all?
Some women are better than some men at boxing.
Can I try to
Alex?
On average, okay, let's just say on average, you think women are better boxers than men?
Alex, I can hear the hamster like dead in the wheel, dude. I didn't say that. I said that I could just as easily take an example of a woman beating up a man, but I wouldn't be able to use that example to extrapolate a truth claim across the entire board or for an entire demographic of people. That's all I'm saying.
Well, then why do women golfers tee off closer?
Dead in the wheel.
I mean, women are physically weaker, so any sort of job that causes, that uses physicality, men are going to have an advantage. I mean, that's just quite simple fact. I mean, you can't really debate.
Yeah, I think Nick said earlier. I probably would have been like, yeah, okay, maybe so, but that's not what you were saying. You kept on pulling from one cheap little example to extrapolate.
I can have a million example. I have a million examples to use.
You guys are.
I think Nick said earlier that something like the traditional gender roles are a product of like experience, right? And I think that's true. Like, clearly, I think that it's pretty clear and obvious that the roles of men and women in the so-called patriarchal structure that we've got of most civilizations on the planet is a result of the violent world, dangerous world that civilizations formed in, right? So men are better at fighting. So, hey, you're going to be in this spot, and you're going to be in a leadership position because you're the ones expected to go out in battlefields, et cetera, et cetera. Right? But the world of today isn't, the world of 200 years ago or 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. Right? So I think things are much easier now. We have much more space for people to inhabit other roles in our society. So I think that pointing to, the fact that, traditionally men are the warriors or the generals or whatever, is kind of missing the point, right? We're talking about a society that is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and our culture and the roles that people are fitting into are just adapting to those changes, right? So if you can say, hey, we need to stop this change or that change because it's opening up a space that I don't like. I mean, that's something we can talk about. Right, but I don't think it's useful to point out.
Let me just use this example. Look at Rachel Levine, who was born Dickie Levine, and basically has her spot as one of the highest, military positions, all because she's a transgender. So that's a war on a man, not because she's the most qualified. So I mean, there's just a million different examples to see why the system's rigged against men, and it's obvious.
And it's not beneficial, really, when even in the military, putting the women in the military. Now we have all these rape accusations and so-called sexual assault accusations. It's only causing problems.
This
Same
was
thing with the
happening with all
workplace.
men too. You realize
Same thing
that,
with
right?
the
that happened then
workplace.
too.
You realize that with hazing in the military, it led to a lot of sexual assaults on men from other men, just simply to embarrass them. There's like a skyrocketing rate of sexual assault in the military from men assaulting other men for the purpose
So-called
of
men.
hazing. So this
Yeah, I
idea,
mean, they're allowing
It's
the
not,
gays
it's
into
not
the
a so-called man.
military.
I think,
No,
I think
no, no,
some people
this-
say, even,
this
even like
wasn't-
historically,
well, hold on.
even appeals
Wait,
to
wait,
tradition.
You're
dude,
not
hold on a second.
you're not
What Hake
debunking
just-
my point. You're not making
Yes,
any
I
valid
am, because
point.
now
No,
you
you're not.
just said
No,
something
you're not.
else very stupid,
I
which
think
was
Doobie
that
has a
because-
point as well.
I think Hake, to your
Guys,
point,
I'm not
right?
even able to like
is-
finish what I was
just-
saying.
just
I'm trying
really
to talk to
quickly,
Hake here
please.
for like 5 seconds.
So I think that Hake, to your point, right? So traditionally,
Come on.
there are many cultures in which the most terrible thing you could do to a guy is emasculate him, right? And one way to do that was to fuck him in the ass. A lot of cultures would say, hey, there's nothing more dominant than fucking the other guy in the ass and forcing him to be your bitch, right? And this is why in the military we have a bunch of testosterone-filled dudes working out all the time, fighting with each other. You had situations where men would attempt to dominate each other by raping each other, by fucking each other in the ass, like they do in prison. Right, so you can call that like female-minded men or something, but this is something men have historically used against each other, like as a weapon.
That doesn't mean that putting women into the military has been a good thing. Like I said,
I
they've
wasn't
been
making that
crying.
argument.
They've been crying.
I
Oh,
wasn't making it, yeah.
sexual assault and all this stuff. Well, you wanted to work with the men. It's happening in the businesses too, and it's only been destructive.
That's
wanting to work with the men,
ridiculous.
wanting to be
Short
part of
last
the
word.
military.
Look at the
doesn't
Me
mean
Wanting to
Too
be
everybody
part of
wants
the
to be
wait, so
raped. Like, that's
letting the
insane.
women be part of the military means that women were accepting getting sexually assaulted. That's
Yeah.
fucking stupid, Hake. And what I was
They
saying
do.
about the hazing thing was that even
Really
if you were to
short,
take
Hunter.
women
Then we got to
out-
go to the next question. We got a lot of questions.
Okay, even if you were to take women out of the equation entirely, you would still see high rates of sexual assault because of hazing, men on men. You tried to claim that was the gays.
Irrelevant.
That is not
Irrelevant.
the gays. In fact, it
Irrelevant.
is actually other straight men
What's this one
molesting
coming in?
or raping other straight men.
And the
Irrelevant.
Dragonite says, Hunter, fewer expectations have been placed on men relative to the past, yet their suicide rates continue to increase.
I would have to go ahead and look at the actual suicide rate because, again, the suicide rate was also very, very high in the past as well. So it could also be that the expectations that now are placed on men are harder to achieve, maybe because of the way our world has changed. There are varying different explanations for that, but I'd have to go and look at the suicide stats myself.
This one from me by Jim Bob says, Ryan, have you considered that women's right to work was just marketing to get them into the debt slave system under the guise of liberation?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that like people aren't exploited in like wage labor jobs, like all throughout history and continue like into perpetuity. It seems so. I don't think that like it was a like the fact that women were quote unquote pushed into. I don't think women were pushed into the workforce. I think women were pushing to get into the workforce, and eventually they pushed hard enough that the wall that was keeping them out had to break. And I think that if people like Nick and succeed in pushing them back out of the workforce in a capacity, which I don't see happening anytime soon, thankfully. But if they were to succeed, I think they would see. Sorry, you would see the same thing happen again. But go on. Yeah, that's all.
You've only raised.
Well, what I would
Go ahead.
say is that again, this idea that women didn't work is not right. Women have always worked. They just were restricted to very specific industries.
Oh, they worked.
So, I mean, they worked. They worked in very specific industries, tailoring, childcare, things like that. It's only recently that they've entered into roles in which men typically filled, but it doesn't. I think. Oh man, I lost track of the question. I'm gonna be real with you guys. I lost track of the question.
This is why women shouldn't have jobs. By the way. There it is. There it is. There was a quota for women on the panel.
That's not it. Okay,
that's what he told us. That's what they told us before the debate.
No. So I think I think that if you pushed a woman out of the workforce, you wouldn't be returning to what it was. It would be something completely different. Women have always been working. Even when they're not working, they're talking amongst each other and influencing, policy decisions within government and things like that. So.
But you're still like nearly doubling the workforce. Granted, many of them were working already, and you're cheapening the value of money and labor. and making it harder for the men to be able
I don't
to
think so.
provide
No,
for their
actually, what it
families.
used to be, it wasn't even that.
Raising the cost of living.
Wait a minute. It wasn't even that only men worked, right? It women and men worked, and children used to work as well.
Nice.
And you'd have children as young as like 5 working.
Fine.
So it wasn't that women didn't work. Women always worked, and children also worked.
Not to
And
this
it's
level,
not,
though.
and it's not that men are being pushed out necessarily, but some men are just not living up to the standards of getting
on.
hired.
No, you okay. So granted
really
that,
fast.
that men aren't allowed to, they're kind of hamstrung from boyhood, but to cheapen labor and double the workforce and put women in working rather than
If we
taking
wanted
care
to
of the
cheapen
kids
labor, we would just make child labor legal.
and having mass immigration.
we used to have child labor.
Hold on,
We'll
let's
just
hear from
make
Hank
it
really
legal
quick.
again.
We got to move on to this.
You're just
next
raising the
question.
cost of living.
This one coming in from, do
No.
appreciate it, made by Jim Bob, says, Ryan, we got this one. Neon Yor says, Hunter, if you were in a burning building, would you rather have a male or female firefighter coming to rescue you?
I would just prefer to have a firefighter in general rescue me. I mean, I
That's
feel
pretty
like
good
there are
statement.
some people like.
Okay.
I mean, think about like. Well, hold on,
Beta.
wait. Think about if any of like Alex, Hake, or Nicholas were in there. Like the firefighter would just leave. They'd be like, "Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah,
They're
you're
not
right.
worth
We
it. You know
would
what? We're not-
leave you.
I would
if
fight the
We're not about to
fire
just
myself. I would
fight.
piss on it and put it out myself.
I would leave
Whip
you
out
in
my
there, bro.
cock and piss on it and put out the fire
Exactly.
all by
Firefighters
myself.
do not.
Okay,
Wow, the
wait,
alpha-
let's-
the
Firefighters
alpha
will
energy
save
one.
even Nick Fuentes. They would
This
save
one
him.
from base
James, I would like to. I'm sorry. I was gonna just say I would
TV.
like to leave here shortly. I want to debate Brittany before it gets too late. So
You got it. This one from, if you have to go, I don't blame you. We've got a lot of questions, so I want to read through as many as I possibly can. We're going to skip any that are remotely insulting. Based streaming at cozy.tv says dating statistics show that rich women still want a man richer than she herself is. Men
Yeah.
have to be providers,
Yeah.
according to women.
In your face.
Yeah. Study said, bitch.
Yeah, studies say,
Check 'em.
yeah, you love studies. Yeah,
Rack
check
them
that
up.
study.
anyone-
Game over.
I don't think
You
anyone here has been arguing that women don't, at large, expect men to make more money than them. Like whether or not you agree that's a good thing or a bad thing is a different thing, but that's not like just not an argument that we were making in this. I don't think.
This one from
Yeah, that
Risky.
seems more of like the cultural inertia that I was talking about earlier. Yeah.
Risky Dave says, make fornication illegal again. And
Nice.
should the recognition of marriage be a federal issue?
Yeah. Because moral issues should be political issues. Political philosophy is philosophy. And so the law should reflect the moral law. Absolutely.
what is
You
that?
got it,
You
Risky
think
Dave.
marriage should be handled federally?
That's what I just said. Wait a
Do you
minute.
think
You
that it-
seriously
do you-
think?
I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if you think like what would that look like? I guess that would just be the federal government not giving marriage licenses to certain couples that are immoral or whatnot.
Yeah, the government.
It's not even a real
would,
couple.
Would license valid marriages, real marriages. And then we could get into the marriage debate, but it's just as simple as there is such a thing as a marriage, and there are things that are not marriages. You could call they could act like marriages. They could approximate something that looks like a marriage, but it's not a marriage.
Yeah, well, I know we have other
Pretense.
questions, so I will let us move on immediately. But just let this be known that Nick touts himself as the America First guy, but this is America Last right now. You're talking about trampling all over the Constitution, disregarding the First Amendment, and instead instituting some kind of a religious moral law. It's
So-called same-sex
it's
marriage
absolutely
is not in the
ridiculous.
Constitution, dude.
Also true,
Should
but
be.
Hey,
I have no
absolutely
problem
should be. Hey, you're
stepping
right,
on
it should be
What
a
did you-
shrine.
Also,
I missed what Hake said, so my bad.
I said so-called same-sex marriage is not in the Constitution.
It doesn't have to be. What's in the Constitution is that Congress cannot uphold any religion. So if they're giving away
It's not a
marriage
religion.
licenses-
It's reality.
Hold on.
It's not a
if
marriage.
they're giving away marriage licenses based upon religious opposition to gay marriage, for example, like what Nick was just talking about, then that would be a violation of the First Amendment.
It's morality. It's not even religion. It's common sense. But you lack
It's
it.
not common sense.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
It's
guys,
a violation of the
Let's
Constitution.
move on to the next one. It says, is Hunter an advocate for the debunked blank slate theory? If not, do you believe you get 50% representation if socialization were the same for men and women?
I'm not even sure what that question means. Thanks
Roughly
anyway.
speaking,
Can you repeat
blank
it again?
slate. Blank Slate is an old book by Pinker, Steven Pinker, the Harvard psychologist, that said,
Mm.
well, basically, he was rejecting the thesis that males and females come out like a blank slate. And he was saying, hey, like in actuality, we have so much evidence that suggests men and women, or I should say males and females when they're born, like they're not a blank slate, that they have these kind of male and female propensities that they kind of drift more toward. So they're saying, is Hunter an advocate for the debunked blank slate theory, namely the idea that when you're born, male or female, you could just be, you don't have any propensities in one direction or the other?
Yeah, I would just say that I have to do a little more research into that then.
You got it?
Opium.
Go ahead.
I would say that I think it would be silly for us to not acknowledge again that estrogen and testosterone do have effects on people's personalities and do have effects on what people just the way that they act and things like that. But as far as how much socialization plays a part in somebody's life, I think it plays a pretty large part. I don't know what the percentages are of how much like somebody's like hormones are influencing them, but I do think that it's a mix of both, and I do think socialization does have a large part. So.
You got it. Dan Zamet says, can lefties see how feminism is the reason that men are less masculine in today's society? Femininity and masculinity are necessary for a successful society.
But what femininity and masculinity are culturally defined. We define those things. So when they're saying men are no longer being masculine, what they mean by that is what is now being considered masculine, they don't like it because they would rather hold on to whatever norm they just happen to be born into. If masculinity is changing to accommodate men being more emotional and actually being willing to express their feelings, for example, then I would say masculinity in that case is changing for the better because we're going to improve the mental health of men, and therefore we're going to see men living better lives in society.
Chicks with armpit hair are gross. Any girl that has armpit hair is gross.
Real.
Yeah, and your diagnosis of the problem is totally messed up. You have no idea what you're talking about.
You have a bike? You have a bike in the background of your
That was a really good rebuttal from Hake, though.
Do you have a bicycle in the background?
Yeah, maybe
in your studio.
Are you?
But Nick, I think it was in your opening you said something.
What are you talking about?
This from Vern Allen says to Nick, what would you say is your biggest disagreement with Hunter?
I think Hunter's an idiot. I don't think he has any valid positions. And I'm not saying that just to be a dick. I mean, I literally think he's too low IQ to even respect a so-called difference of opinion. I don't think his positions are grounded. I think he has opinions like like a child or a female or a dog has opinions.
But what are they are?
Which is actually
instead of using it to use him as a punching bag, what's the position that you have that you'd most disagree on?
Well, he's an atheist. I would say that's foundational, as he doesn't believe in God. That's number one.
Arrogance. Yep.
Hunter, have you gotten your fourth booster yet, Hunter?
What's that?
Have you gotten your fourth booster yet?
I'm waiting in line
Nick's
actually
opening,
for my ninth.
He said that the war on men is all about feminism. He said the war on men is all about feminism, and I agree with him. I agree that from his perspective, what he perceives as the war on men is all about feminism. It's all about this force that was women pushing against the box that people had placed, or society at the time had placed women in, and decided like this is the role that women are supposed to fulfill. And when women said no, fuck that, we don't like this role. A lot of them did. Some of them maybe enjoyed it. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the ones that didn't. They pushed against it, and eventually, again, we moved to a point where less women are expected to fit into those boxes. And you're really upset about that. And so when you say the war on men is all about feminism, I think you're 100% right about your perspective on the war on men. You perceive women pushing against those antagonistic forces as a war on men. Because it's
not women. Women weren't pushing. It was like Jews behind them. It was like Jewish men. Women don't rise up against. It's like that scene. It's like that scene in Django. It was like that scene in Django Unchained when Leonardo DiCaprio says, "Why don't they rise up and kill us? It's because their skulls associated with submissiveness." That's the same thing with women. Women aren't pushing up against anything. It was a bunch of Jewish guys that said, "Hey, go stand. Hey, here's the sign. Go stand over there."
Bingo card. So that's cool.
Listen,
at this point, it's a sign.
Guys,
equality is a fake. Equality is a fake idea.
When Nicholas starts going off on these tangents, you should just like nod, smile, and wave, kind of like you would with to a grandparent with dementia. Just like politely nod, yes, dear, let's get you to bed now, Grandpa. when he starts going off on those tangents,
one from-
that would probably be the
Get
best
me
thing.
my tapioca, Hunter.
Alex Jones says, does the panel, not that Alex Jones, does the panel agree that traditional values must be reciprocated in a relationship? For example, if a man takes a woman to dinner, he should be allowed to push her stool in later.
No, that's vulgar. It shouldn't even be allowed to have that type of false sex.
Yeah.
But it feels good. What do you mean?
Yeah. I thought you meant like I thought it was like beat the shit out of her or something.
And to be super clear,
I
you
don't know
actually
about
do
that.
some prep. You know, you can clean it out a bit, and then you push the stool. And so it's not like full of shit when you're doing it. And
This
it actually
from
feels great.
Martin
I recommend
Blank.
it to everybody.
Martin Blake
if
says
you let
that
a
should
girl
be illegal.
pay or go Dutch on a date, that's gay. That's homosexual. So
Martin Blank
No,
says,
I don't think so. I think.
okay.
go ahead.
Well, okay.
True.
So I was just gonna say, like, I think a lot of women will split on the date. I say
I
women.
know, but that's not.
Okay.
That's very if
A
a
lot
guy
of,
does
but
that,
okay,
he's a
but we
homosexual.
go split on the thing, so people don't have the expectation
No,
of sex
fine.
after.
No, stop it. Just stop it.
What?
Brittany wants her meals paid for. Stop.
Cat fight.
Yeah.
Let's go.
This one coming
I
in
think
from.
can I say one more thing about that? I think if you're going to go out to dinner
10
with someone, then you should be able to communicate with them about who should pay for the bill and how you want to manage that. Like you two should have like.
No,
if
that's
you're not
ridiculous.
mature-
You shouldn't communicate with them at all.
I'm
What are you
all
talking
about-
about?
Who's gonna pay for
You
the
I'm all
can-
about
so
leveling
wait,
the playing field.
If you're not mature
so.
enough, I'm going to finish. If you're not mature enough to have a discussion about who's going to pay for the
men are
meal, then you're
supposed
not
to be
mature enough to go
providers,
on the date in the first
so-
place.
I think if
I'm
you're a dude, you
sorry.
should pay for it. To be honest with you, no, I have
think
to.
it's
I have to
dumb.
say. I have to
There
say.
you go, dude.
I think there's something to say
Based.
about like beta men who can't afford to pay for dinner, trying to like normalize having the women pay or splitting the bill, etc. Because they just can't afford it, and that's fine. Just like I think there's something to say about like men pushing 18-year-olds to open up OnlyFans accounts, right? Because they want to make them more sexually available. And kind of masking this in the language of like feminism or women's liberation, etc. I don't know. I'm a much more toxically masculine person than I think most of you.
I wasn't even
and
sure
I'm-
how you were gonna
And
be
I'm
on
totally
Tuesday.
okay with that. But I think that I don't know. It's just I agree that if you're going to take someone out to dinner, I think that the onus should probably be on the person who invited the other person out. To be honest with you.
I think I'm
No
going to go
sex
ahead
outside
and
marriage.
from here. I'm going to go ahead and split. But
You got
first,
it?
James, I really appreciate you having me on. And Brittany, if you want to come on the channel before I stop
Yeah.
my stream, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. for
Hunter,
like 10,
you're
15
already
minutes, but-
quitting. Why are you quitting so fast?
I mean,
Over
we've
there
been
in a
talking
minute.
for
Because you got humiliated?
We've been talking for 2.5
You've
hours.
gotten
so I'm gonna go-
humiliated so bad.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
why?
Yeah. But either way, hey, I appreciate the conversation, everybody. Thanks so much, and thanks, James, for having me on. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
Nick, hopefully one day you'll have a family, so you too will have to get a minivan. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you get notified when I drop a new video.